We are live and roll for combat. You see, that's how you're supposed to say the intro.
I know.
It's how do you do Knights of Last Call?
I say hello and good evening. Welcome to the Knights of Last Call. My name is Derik Melinda, welcoming you to another exciting evening where we're going to talk about some obscure RPG that no one has ever played and no one will ever talk about again.
There you go.
There you go. And Linda and I on Arcade Mark say, I'm Mark Seifter. And she says, and I'm Linda Dias Palmer. And then we say, and this is Arcane Mark. And then we play like a little 2-second intro video of a lightning bolt over our logo.
And what is
And then
happening?
we play like a little
I just get into it.
intro video of a lightning bolt over.
That's why she's going to be bigger than me in a year. See, because
I start talking, man.
people don't have time for this. Let's just cut right straight to the thing. But anyways,
you know why I can't do an intro? Because I can't remember the intro like from week to week. So I'm just,
That does it. Just do a different intro each time.
I have.
Like The Simpsons, the
I
couch guy,
have.
right?
Yeah, I guess. So we're the Simpsons of role playing, I guess. But
No.
chat today.
so we have someone brand new. Who's this Hannah? Hannah, who are you?
I'm Hannah. I'm on YouTube, known as Feywild Fiend. Talk about a lot of Feywild stuff, specifically for D&D.
Oh, D&D. We got 5e in the house for real, as opposed to us fakers.
I make no pretenses about being I barely know the rules to 5th edition D&D.
Steven, how many books do you have to write in 5e before you stop being a faker according to your definition?
We have published.
How many do you have to publish?
I don't know.
Because
I think about it. It's like I'm saying that we're fakers, yet we published something like 30 books in 5e. So maybe we shouldn't
that's
say
what I'm
that. I mean,
if you think of yourself as a 5e faker, maybe you actually aren't anymore. You've kind of
Maybe I'm
become
not.
the mask.
I guess so. I guess it's like you always think yourself like an amateur at something until you're not, and then you realize
Yeah,
you're
imposter
not.
syndrome.
Right. Like you're
Right.
not. Oh well.
Everyone in the tabletop RPG industry, with maybe a few small exceptions, but like almost everyone has some form of imposter syndrome.
Wow, I never thought I had it, but now I guess I do for 5e. Not for Pathfinder. That I'm like very confident. I say I know the rules as well as almost anyone except for Mark, obviously. But I can go toe to toe with most people on the rules.
Ooh, that sounds like a
not
challenge.
Derik though. Derik, I'd say actually. Let me rephrase that. I'd say Derik, Linda, and Mark are above me. But
Mark.
99% of everyone else.
I haven't interacted with Linda, but I will definitely concede my hat to Mark and probably safely Linda. But
Yeah.
I feel like I could get you, Steve.
Oh, I think you actually know the rules. I'll tell you why, because you know the player rules better than me. I don't know the player rules that well.
It's just the rules.
I know the rules. I know the general rules.
Steven's
and I know
like
the high-end rules.
Steven's like multiple attack penalty. That's for the players. I just ignore that and all my
No,
monsters.
I do that. No, I have a rule that everyone who plays in my game, which kind of leads a little into our main topic, needs to know their own character.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
And they need to know how they run their character. And if they argue, I say, look, I have to run 500 monsters and 1,000,000 NPCs and everything else. You could figure out how to run your damn character. I'll take care of
Someone
the
in
rest.
chat asked if our 35e books is more than WotC published. I just looked.
Oh god, yeah.
I think WotC has published 47 if you count some of the
I'm
ones
sorry,
that
that's
affiliates
that's
wrote.
in 1 year or 2 years.
Yeah, WotC has published 47 over the course of a decade, which is more than we have done, and some of ours are pretty short,
That's true.
to be fair.
Some of theirs are short too, though.
You're right.
They have several 64-page books out there. So
which ones are 64 pages?
I got one right next to me.
Some of the Spelljammer
Adventure?
ones are,
this
but
one.
I think those were counted
Mort-
together as
Mort's
one book.
Planner.
Mort's Planner Parade was definitely one of the 47, and it.
Yeah, I don't.
Or wait, no, the Planescape may have counted as one on the list I just looked at.
Okay, because those are all 64
So,
pages.
I think that they published more than us, Steven. But the person in chat was wondering.
What's close? It's closer than it should be. Let's put it that way.
Closer than it maybe I would have expected, or Steven, thinking of himself as an imposter, would have expected.
You're gaining on him, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of sad.
Well, again, I don't. But no, I think that that's a very reasonable expectation, even, which is to say, look, to a certain, especially when you're playing in a game that is more complicated. I'd say a Pathfinder 2 character has a lot of knobs and levers, and there's a lot of different things going on, and this particular feat or this particular spell does this thing in this situation. And certainly 5th edition, I think, in some ways falls into the same category. Look, you don't need to know the rules, but I need you to at least know how the stuff on your character sheet functions. And if you don't have it all memorized, it's fine, that you know where to look it up or have the ability to look it up.
And my players are good because they'll help. Like, I'll say, what's this? And they'll jump on the computer, and they never fight. That they accept the rules, whatever it is, even if it's against them. I mean, it took us 35 years to get to this point, because 20 years ago we used to get into actual fist fights. Like, I said to Mark, a recent stream, how we used to get into fights, and he thought when we was kids. I was like, oh no! I was like,
Steve was like, when I was 30,
we were
that
in
was
my
35.
30s, we used to get into fist fights.
Yeah, that by the time we were out of high school, we were done fighting about.
Oh no, we were getting into real fights. Like, of course, it was Age of Worms, and I think if there's any campaign
it's a great adventure path.
Oh my god, it's the best. I mean, and if there's any campaign that can make you get into fist fights, it's Age of Worms, because that thing is brutal. It is brutal, that campaign.
But yeah, but that can lead to one of my top 2 nitpicky GM it just irritates me. The first is when somebody rolls a die to a D20 game, they're rolling a die, and then they shout out the number. And the number that I need to hear, the number that makes sense, the number that matters to me is what your total value is, D20 plus modifier, because I need to compare it to the monster's armor class or to the DC. So when they shout out 13, but that's what they rolled on their die roll, not what their total is, that's my number one, that irritates me. The second one is where someone goes, I'm going to cast this spell. And you go, great, what does it do? And they go, I have no idea. It's like, so why are you casting that? I'm going to use this, I'm going to use double slash. It's like, okay, what does that do? And you're like, I don't know. I have no idea. So why
Sounds good.
Sounds good. It sounds cool. It's on my sheet. I want to push the button. And I'm like, I don't care that you don't know what it does, but wouldn't you look it up first before choosing to use that as your action for the turn? What if it's completely useless?
That would terrify me. I'm the type of player that I will create a cheat sheet for myself, and I'll have different scenarios in combat: close range, multiple enemies,
Perfect.
One enemy. I had, as a druid, my first character was a druid, and I had a list of animals and what they would best be used for, and it saved characters' lives because you had to think fast.
Wow.
Yeah. No. We've talked on our stream many times about the especially back in 3rd edition Pathfinder 1, the combat cheat sheet. And just having almost like an attack matrix. And when I'm in, like you said, when I'm in this animal form, or if you have a more complicated character, or if you know that you're going to be casting a lot of summon spells or polymorph spells or whatever, to have that quick reference on hand. Yeah, that's just called being polite and being prepared, which is sometimes in short supply.
So
I think it seems like most of us on this stream are the person who makes the giant list of polymorph wild shape forms and consults it. It's like, wait a minute. The one that has a pounce ability, which I could use right here, is this one, but this one has grab, and I could use a grab in this one other circumstance. And that was totally me. I am so guilty of, in 3.5, playing the Archivist class, which was also known as the class that was entirely designed for this exact style that we're talking about. Because it was like, if you look at it, it's like a cleric, but they don't even get all of the cleric spells. They only get a few that are in their spell book with an interesting and kind of cool buff mechanic based on knowledge. But the core thing that it could do is, if you could find domains that offered spells at various levels, you could learn them at whatever the lowest level was. Right. So if you're the person who makes these lists and finds spells that aren't normally on the cleric's list or are at a weirdly different level, you could just be a god with that class. And if you weren't willing to go and do actual real world librarian work, it was not that good. So it was like role playing the librarian.
Yeah, the game reinforcing the fiction outside of it. How meta, it was a meta class. So you have to be a nerdy librarian outside of the class.
A few quick things. First of all, myself, Mark, and Derik will not shut up. So, Hannah, feel free to interrupt anyone at any time, and you guys let her talk, because she's new to this channel, and she doesn't know how aggressive Derik is.
But I do remember. I do I recognize her from something? Was she?
Yes.
I was in the Baron stream.
You were on the Baron stream. Oh, that was awesome.
Thank you.
That was such a cool idea that he had. It was so awesome that he had all these people on. That was so
Yes.
fun. I obviously didn't watch the whole thing. It was really long, but
Did you see me?
I
Design
saw you at the end. Yes.
137 rooms.
Yeah, but I like skipped through to see who he was on, and
Yeah.
that's why I recognize you, Hannah, because
That's
that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
That's-
well, that was a
did-
lot of fun.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did you enjoy that? That seemed like that.
Oh my gosh, yes. I loved doing that. And it was a lot of fun. And I'd never like built a dungeon like that. I mean, very few people have built a dungeon like that, 365 room dungeon, but I'd never worked with someone else to create a dungeon and like mind melding with all these people and also the people who had been on before. And I was watching the stream when it started and I had to take a break before I came on. And it had changed so much, and yet the thread was still there, and it was just really cool.
Very cool idea.
That was crazy. That it was a lot, especially because there's a 12-hour time limit, and then he's like, we were up against the clock. There was no tomorrow when we ran out of time. So, but
There's some people on Twitter now trying to keep it going. They're trying to keep Dungeon 24 going, and I'm like, I feel like that ship has passed. But hey, it's all right.
There was a new challenge this year, but it didn't sound as fun.
Mm.
I don't know what it was. It was like traps or something. I don't know.
I was thinking like Hex Crawl 24 or something like that. And
No,
people do,
I think it was
365
traps.
hexes.
Yeah, it was traps or something. So for those of you who
Anyways.
don't know, this is our weekly news and discussion channel where anything's possible. Who knows? I can start talking about the Muppets. Probably will, because I like talking about the Muppets. I can start talking about Derik's voluptuous beard, which he seems to be growing. He's turning into ZZ Top in front of us. So
Nope, just lazy.
just lazy. Well,
Lazy top.
Lazy Top. There we go. That's just as good. If you have any questions, feel free to say hi in the chat. Super chats are always answered, no matter what. Questions are usually answered if we get around to it. And with that, people like your beard, by the way, Derik.
Hey, listen. If you can grow it, grow it. I've never had like the full on beard, but we'll see how it goes.
You need the scholar's beard.
Right. I don't have anywhere to go until March because that's when I'm going back to Vegas. So we'll see. Maybe I'll just keep it going throughout the winter.
Really, I looked at my schedule. I think I got something every weekend. I don't know what happened. I kind of in trouble this year. Anyhow, so there's some news, not a lot this week, but I do want to talk about some things. And actually, I'm glad we have you on, Derik, because first up for news, which happened a week ago, it actually happened in our last stream, but I didn't have time. Was it Janelle Jaquays died?
Yeah, Janelle Jaquays. Yeah.
Jaquays. And you did a whole stream on her. I hate to say it, as much as I know everyone in this industry and we've been really kind of big in the industry, I did not know anything about her because I'm going to freely admit a big hole in my history, and I wouldn't mind if you guys explain to me, is that she contributed a lot to, the Thieves Guild?
Judges Guild.
Judges Guild. I never understood what the Judges Guild was, and I was never part of it or did anything with it. So I've heard of it, but I know nothing about it.
Yeah, so Judges Guild was just a company that sort of came up in the 70s, and they created their sort of own. They were an early publisher, kind of like Games Workshop in a way, like they were another publisher of role playing games. And it basically was one of the first main companies. You could say they were the first third-party publisher in a way for D&D. And so they created this whole kind of their own little world, and it was typically called the Wilderlands of high fantasy. And very famously, the sort of capital city was called the city-state of the Invincible Overlord. And there was a bunch of adventure modules that they published, including Caverns of Thracia, which is what Janelle had written. And it was sort of like one of the first big, because before that, dungeons were typically just like mazes, or they were just kind of like, the kind of crazy random scrawl that you would see in some of the early, Dungeons and Dragons stuff. Caverns of Thracia was this like interconnected faction-based dungeon with, all sorts of, politics almost to it. It was a very like living, dynamic place. So it really kind of, changed the game in terms of like the way the dungeon design and level design worked. And that's why, of course, most people are more familiar with Janelle's work because she worked for id Software. So she did level design for Quake, Quake 2, Hexen, just many video games. Just like an incredible number of video game achievements too. I would say probably just as large, if not larger than her accomplishments in the tabletop space.
Right. So Stephen, if you remember, if your knowledge of some of this stuff comes from Roll for Combat episodes, when we had Justin Alexander on talking about those interconnected dungeons with factions and other advice for good dungeons, it's fair to say that Janelle's Caverns of Thracia is one of the first places that you start to see published adventures that are following that philosophy and that were less of, like Derik said, just kind of go through and kill the monsters.
Yeah.
Also, I was looking for it, but there was another book that she was a co-author on, along with I think William O'Connor's, which for me and I think for a lot it was the DMGR 1, which is the Dungeon Master's Guide Reference 1. It was the blue books. Remember the green books, the blue books, and the red books from second edition? So DMGR 1 was like called the Campaign and Catacombs Source Guide or something like that. And it was a book that basically described, like, for the first time ever, like how to deal with problem players and like how to like, make you only had one person show up or two people show up or people are saying you're campaign. Like it was the first time that they really wrote a book that like kind of like was addressing the dungeon master and like talking about dungeon master problems. And I remember I had that book as a teenager and it was like one of my favorite books of all time because I was like, oh, hey, you're helping me and you're talking to me. And it was really, like we think about a lot of the great DMG advice that comes nowadays in like 4th edition DMG or, Game Mastery Guide from Pathfinder. And it really didn't have that as much in that era. So that book in particular was really meaningful to me. And she was also an artist.
Yeah,
so,
I know. I heard that too.
It's like it's the number of pieces that I'm sure you would recognize instantly, but like the very famous Dragon Mountain piece, the cover of the Grand Duchy of Karamikios from Mystara, like it was a lot that she did.
So look at just FYI, look what I updated with my collection over the
that's shiny.
Weeks. It's this is the version I had because remember
that's Holmes basic.
Yeah, so that's with the blue cover. And look,
the blue cover and the chits.
The chits. Remember, I said I had the chits. I was and look, they're still intact. So I got one of the originals, and
79, I think that came out, or 80.
And ta-da!
There it is. Comes with Keeping the Borderlands, one of the greatest modules of all time. Much better than B1, which is not really good. Into the Unknown,
but. I was happy to, after seeing your collection, Derik, I said, I got to start upping my game.
I got mine around here somewhere.
Oh, I know you do.
It's over there. Anyways, Janelle, unfortunately, but the good news is, and I talked about this on my stream, is that she had a lot of supporters and she was sick for a little while before she passed. And as a result, her wife started a GoFundMe. And unfortunately, obviously, she did pass. But now there's, it's America, so there's medical bills, medical debt, funeral expenses, legacy issues about her estate. And so her wife is still asking that if people want to donate, that they could be used to help cover her final expenses. And I think let me check here. Yeah, she's at 99,000 of 100,000, which was their total fundraising goal. So, we had a link for that. So if you are interested in donating, you can just type in Janelle Jaquays GoFundMe, and it'll take you there, and you can throw some stuff in there. But actually, you're there's some of the top people who donated. One of them was your friend. I think I saw him in here. Was Baron DeRob. That's one of the top donators. He put in $500.
Well,
so good for him.
Nice.
So there you go.
Be like Baron.
It's a game jam. I don't know. I linked to something. I don't know if it was the right thing. The only thing I know of Judges Guild is that I thought it actually was something like you got if you were like a judge. or like advanced or something. 'Cause I was young at the time, and I have friends who have the Judges Guild book. And have you ever seen that thing, the new one? It's like 3 feet tall. Have you ever seen that?
Oh
book?
yeah.
And I'm like,
the one that has all the maps from
Yeah,
the.
it's like,
from
why
the
do you have a
city-state?
book that's as big as me?
Yeah.
It's so crazy. It's so monstrous. And then what's his name? Roomhammer at a convention I was at 2 weeks ago was carrying it around, just for fun. I was like,
Unfortunately, this is a news channel, so but unfortunately, the one of the original, or like the owner, or the original owner of Judges Guild was a guy named Bob Bledsoe. He passed away, I think, early 2000s. His son took over the company, and his son, unfortunately, was kind of a asshole, and it was pretty racially insensitive and said a bunch of really horrible stuff on social media. So as a result, like a lot of companies like TTRPG took down all their Judges Guild stuff.
got it. That's why.
So it can be pretty tough in some ways to find that stuff now, because the industry was like, you don't say that shit. So that is an unfortunate mark on the legacy, but it is the case.
So, in lighter news, and I got there was a lot being reported on this, but there was a lot of confusions that Ravensburger is releasing a Disney RPG, Chronicles of Light, Darkness Falls. What a name!
Chronicles of Light,
no, it's
Darkness
Disney RPG, Disney role-playing game, Chronicles of Light, Darkness Falls. It's like,
but see, you missed it. That's the way you make a lot of money in this business. You just say the name of my company, RPG. MCDM RPG, Disney RPG. You just go roll for combat, the RPG, and that's it. That's your Kickstarter. $3 million.
It's actually not a bad idea. Now I think about it, but well, it's not though, because people were like, first they said it's an RPG, but then it's actually an adventure game designed and illustrated by women. Comes out July 21st, and it's a box set and a board game, but sort of. It sounds like it's very, I don't know if you know what it sounds like? It sounds like a Gloomhaven type experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like.
Yeah.
It seemed like that to me too, but probably without like the miniature combat, highly tactical part of it.
Yeah. Well, because first it was being reported as an RPG, but now it's like, well, it's a board game RPG. But it does have where you have, I'm reading in here, familiars, creatures, items on a modular board. I was like, okay, that's Gloomhaven right there. Or one of those foldable boards, which is very popular right now. And then it has RPG type elements where you get to play as like Moana or Violet or Maid Marian or Belle, which is, again, characters you could probably play and then level up and do things
where's
with.
the Elsa? That's the only character I'd want to play, is the one with all the sick ice magic.
That is.
Now hold on, because Maid Marian. I'd play her in a heartbeat.
Wait, are we talking the Fox Maid Marian?
Yes, it's the Fox.
Yeah. Who
It's
else
the
is
Fox
a Disney Maid Marian?
I don't know if they're. Look, I've been out of the Disney loop. I don't know. They could have made a live action. They made a live action of everything else. Maybe they made a live action remake of Robin Hood, and it was just a Robin Hood movie.
We'll get like a Cats version of it.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, if you look at Maid Marian, she's holding a tennis racket in the art. So I was like, here, I can send the picture so you can see.
Maybe
what it looks like.
she's playing Mario Tennis with everybody.
Isn't she playing badminton?
Probably badminton.
Oh yeah, I bet it is badminton.
Yeah. Wow.
Everybody else looks like they're ready to fight in the art, and Maid Marian looks like she's ready for badminton.
It's an RPG.
So much respect.
Clearly, it's an RPG. Clearly, her ancestry has a Jaws attack. Okay. And she just, it's one of those classic RPG things where you're like, I'm the pretty fox princess, and then I'm going to rip out his throat with my jaws, and his blood's going to come pouring down. And then it's like, and now we're going to go to tea.
I think Maid Marian is just too powerful. The others have to use like a giant ore or a book or magic or like a superpower. Marian is just like, I don't even care. I'm just gonna play badminton.
Violet from The Incredibles is very powerful.
Let's be realistic. Violet is going to just destroy all of them.
Oh, that's not even,
probably.
close.
Unless Moana like brings in all of Maui's stuff.
I remember in the first Incredibles movie where she could turn invisible, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, so she can turn invisible. And I was like thinking, are they gonna go full Sue Storm with her? And then she like could actually do she could do the energy fields, and I was oh man.
No, it's totally the Fantastic Four.
She's my favorite character from from The Incredibles.
Really?
In terms of like her personality, her power set, and like the way that she interacts with like her family, like it's really nice. Like
She's such a like classic teenager. Like they let her
Yes.
keep that edginess while giving her that love of family.
right. And like I love the scene in the final and the end of the final movie where like the plane crashes down and they're all huddled in the crater, but like Violet saved them all with like a force field, you know, and it's like one of those things the mom looks over. I think she says like, that's my girl or something, because it's like one of those great moments. Cause it's like, yeah, she's a teenager, but like she loves her family and she would do anything for her family. She's not going to let anything happen to her family. Anyways, great.
But to be fair, like if you
Great
can
movie,
create a
great.
force field and not allow your entire family to be
Well,
destroyed.
she couldn't. That was the thing. She was having problems.
Oh, that's true.
And then
Right.
they had to like not
So
force
chat
her.
has some Robin Hood watchers who pointed out that Marion's only like 100% combat scene from the Robin Hood movie was using a badminton racket. So
Got it. I don't remember.
She's
that
an
movie
icon.
at all, to be honest. Yeah, I don't remember any of this. I'm looking at them. It's like, okay, the Incredibles I've seen about 1,000 times. Moana I've seen quite a bit. I actually like that movie a lot. I think that movie is extremely well done. Beauty and the Beast is the first. I actually saw that as a movie reviewer, and I saw it as a preview, and it was one of the first previews I saw like in a private office theater by Disney. That was one of the first times they ever did that too. It was very cool, and reviewed it. And that was like their first, like, big animated movie, because they did that with what was it? Little Mermaid. But Little Mermaid was the first, but they didn't really know what they were doing, and then they started to really get good at it with Beauty and the Beast, which was their second big one, and then obviously Aladdin. They kind of perfected it. But I have not seen the Maid Marian. I haven't seen that movie in 40 years plus. I barely remember it. I just remember everyone says there's foxes, and everyone's a fox. That's all.
There are
No, Robin Hood's
Everyone's an
a fox.
animal.
Right, everyone's an
Robin
animal.
Hood's a-
Sorry, right.
right.
Everyone's an animal.
Yeah.
Because
Friar
Little
John
Fry is a bear.
Friar
Little
Tuck
John is
like-
a bear, right?
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a bear.
Well, he's Baloo,
Yeah,
right,
basically.
right.
yeah. And he looks like Baloo.
In fact, I think it's all characters from the Jungle Book, because like Prince
Oh,
John,
you're right.
I think is like supposed to be like Shere Khan, and like
He's a lion, yeah.
and then
Shere Khan is a tiger.
yeah, no, it isn't. Oh, maybe he has maybe he has a.
Big cats.
He's a big cat.
Yeah, they're similar though, and they
And then
look similar. Like their scheming face is like a very similar face.
Yeah, and they got the snake. I think it's very similar.
Well,
Anyways.
anyhow, it comes out. It's wow. Here's the funny thing. What do you think the price? Okay, box set. It's like a big box. An actual board game, modular
Yeah.
board game pieces, all that jazz.
Yeah, if it was made by Cephalopod, it would be like $150.
Right,
But it's
right.
Disney, and they're going to be printing it at a scale that even God can't comprehend.
Correct.
So I'm going to say $49.99.
Mark, what's your take? What do you think it's priced at?
Okay, so I do agree with Derik that even the heavens above and the hells below cannot comprehend Disney's ability to print things on a scale. And I think they will maybe they'll use cheaper materials than Cephalopod. There's not much just packing stuff. I think they're going to get it lower. I think 40 is too much for like an impulse buy for the kids. I'm going to say 30.
Well, he said
I said $49.99.
he said 50.
Oh, he's at 50. Okay, I'm going to say 30 anyway.
30
Okay.
anyhow. It's Ravensburger. What do you think, Hannah? How much do you think it is?
Oh my gosh. I'm in the field of they can print it for really, really cheap, but they also know that a niche group of people would probably pay good money for it. And I don't underestimate their love of money. So I'll go bigger. I'll go like 70.
Drum roll.
Drum roll. So the funny thing is, if this was a Kickstarter, it would probably be $100 easily. If any of us,
Because they wouldn't be printing
Oh, yeah,
more
right.
than like
then
they wouldn't be printing
right.
at Disney numbers with a Kickstarter, right?
Yeah, right. So, but and if it was anyone else, it is $29.99.
Damn, Mark was so correct.
I know. But my point is like,
I mean,
How are
none
they
of us
making
guessed
money?
the $9.99, but we all knew it was going to end at
You said
$9.99.
$30.
He said $30, so he's
Yeah.
off by you, but you're over. So Price of Right
What?
rules.
I said 30 because we all were saying
No,
we
I know,
all
I'm
knew
kidding,
that
I
30
know.
was $29.99
I
and 50 was $49.99.
Mark-
But the point
Mark
is,
100% gets that.
he gets it. But the point is, damn, that is so
No.
cheap. It's so cheap.
Honestly, if Derik hadn't already gone cheap to begin with, I might not have gone that cheap on my guess. I might have been closer to around him, but I decided to go even lower after that, and it worked out.
God bless them. I don't know how
I thought you weren't going to ask unless it was
money.
really cheap or really expensive.
Right.
Good point, but I'm just stunned how cheap that is. You know, it's really inexpensive. You know, I think they could have easily gotten away with 39 or something, and it's actually exclusive in Target for a little while, and then it'll be everywhere else. So, God only knows. I mean, anyhow, it's available in Target on July 7th, and then nationwide on July 21st. So on top of
There you
that,
go.
maybe that's how they got it. Is that Target paid an exclusive, so they're able to get it cheap. All I know is, God bless them, man, because they're probably the only people on earth who can do things that cheap. Because I was just talking to some of my warehouses and printers and publishers just literally last few weeks, and I mean, everything is so expensive now. Even like the Monty Python board game. I don't know if you saw that, because welcome to the world of...
I have not.
Okay, actually,
I
I'll
haven't
do that.
either.
I will make that as one of the news topics. So
Monty Python board game, though, isn't that just going to be like a medieval inspired?
Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Monty Python and the Holy Grail board game, which just went on to Kickstarter, and it's actually on BackerKit. Let me rephrase that. $189,000 for 3,454 backers, and it looks pretty fun, actually. I have to say, looks like they did a pretty good job. The site's actually pretty good, and I actually just saw the play again, and damn, Spamalot was good. My kids, they were like, that was an A++. That
Your
show.
kids, it sounds like your family liked it, even though they literally had never heard of King Arthur before and thought you were making up King Arthur.
My wife and kids knew nothing about King Arthur, to the point they thought it was fake. And I'm like, oh my God, what are you learning in school nowadays? You
Not
guys,
medievalism.
obviously. I was like, not anything. But here's the fun. Now look at the shipping. Is that the shipping and
Shipping's actually only $7 in the
in the
US.
United States, because there's rules in the United States, because our shipping is also pretty expensive, because sometimes we're getting people that are complaining about Roll for Combat when our shipping is so expensive. Well, welcome to what shipping is, because Amazon has ruined everyone. And I looked here, I'm like, wow, this is the first time I've actually seen an actual realistic shipping table, because Canada's $38, South Africa's $52, UK and Europe $49, Asia 54, and Australia and New Zealand $60, and that's just for the shipping. That doesn't
Wait,
even
does
include...
that mean that they can ship it to literally anywhere in the world except for like Mexico?
No, Mexico's
Because they had United States, Canada,
know.
then every other continent
I
except
know,
I guess
I know.
Antarctica and Mexico.
Well, there's actually a few. It's unfortunate. Like my very first Kickstarter, some people from Russia ordered our books, and it's actually impossible. You can't send anything to Russia. So,
With your guys' Kickstarters, how do you do? Do you do shipping? Do you collect shipping later?
yes, now I do.
Okay.
Because what
Yeah.
I got killed on that is that
Right. And a lot of people got killed on that. But I always wonder sometimes if that doesn't feel like a bit like not bait and switch, but you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like a situation where you're like, well, I already put $100 or something into this Kickstarter. And then, 6 months later, 8 months later, when fulfillment comes along, and now we have a better idea of what the shipping costs are going to be. And I want, I get it shipped, and it's like, okay, well, shipping is another $35 or $40. And you're like, I feel like I have to pay this because I already put $100 in.
I've had long discussions with some of my
There's no right answer,
backers.
right?
No, the answer is that, like, I literally show them and say this is what it costs, and not only that, we're even getting a discount. And it's mostly the countries and COVID taxes, almost all of it, because shipping wasn't that expensive until COVID, and now I mean, I don't know how we got into this topic, but there were all these new taxes. So, for example, in Australia, I think it's either 75 cents or $1 per pound they added to all shipments as a, quote, COVID tax, which, of course, they never removed. A lot of countries did this. So a lot of countries added anywhere from 50 cents to $1 per pound for anything shipped as a COVID tax, and they never removed it. So when you have something like books, it's there's also a flat fee, so no matter what, it'll cost a certain amount, usually 20, 30 bucks. But then you have these board games, which weigh like 30, 40, 50 pounds. They, it's literally you're paying $1 per pound plus shipping, like because of taxes. And there's nothing we can do about it because that's just... So some companies eat it. So if you ever see a board game or if you ever see a very cheap Kickstarter and the shipping is really cheap, they're eating it. It's just that simple because you can't do cheap shipping. Even if you're in the country, you can't do cheap shipping because it's usually by pound. And if you're in the United States, the only good thing about shipping in the United States is we have a thing called media mail. And media mail is super cheap. And we could also ship things, and as long as it weighs, I think, less than 70 pounds, it doesn't matter what you're shipping. It's not even by weight. You can actually bulk ship things, like as long as you can fit it in a box. There's I think it is Priority Mail. Priority Mail has, I think, a 70-pound limit as long as you fit it in the box. And someone figured out there's nothing on Earth that actually weighs more than 70 pounds that would actually fit in the box that size, unless you're looking at like, outer space, like dark star material. There's nothing you can find that heavy.
Come for the RPG tips, stay for the shipping logistics. You want to hear a funny story? It's kind of gaming related.
People like to hear this stuff.
Right. So as some people may know, or maybe people don't know actually, because this is Roll for Combat, not my stream. I also do woodworking, and I make furniture and tables, and I make, those sort of gaming style tables, the vault style tables, which have become very famous because of Wormwood, which did, massive Kickstarters, and they did all the tables for Critical Role and all that other stuff. Anyways, they just did a couple years ago or 2 years ago, like a big, huge, another second Kickstarter for their modular game table, their big game table. And they were looking, and they've got to ship these packages all across the nation, potentially the world, but certainly the nation. And they're producing it locally, obviously, and out of their own factory. So they were like, well, we want to do it by freight. And they were looking into freight prices. But the freight prices had a minimum weight, and their table didn't make it. So they ended up taking these crates that had the table pieces in them, and they had to add bricks to the crates to get them up to like, 300 pounds or something, so that it could qualify for the freight rate, which even at 300 pounds of 50 extra pounds of brick was still way cheaper than shipping it, by a truck. And so it was like crazy that our system is designed in such a way that it's like, yeah, let's load up these crates with bricks so that we can get a better price on our shipping.
It's the only thing we're actually pretty good at in America is shipping, because when I was doing work on my house and we were looking at buying actual bricks, stone, and it was cheaper for us to order and ship the stone. We're talking about several tons of stone from like Kentucky and have it shipped to New York than to actually buy it in New York. And I was like, wow, that is impressive. Our shipping, it's one thing we're good at. Bad healthcare, but cheap shipping. There you go.
Gotta cover a lot of ground.
Yeah, that is true. We are a big country. It's funny. Everyone, I was actually...
a lot of roads, a lot of rail.
Yeah, there's a lot of roads, a lot of rail. And there actually is, that's one thing we're very good at is shipping. But it is fascinating.
This was actually your first bit of advice, people. If you want to start a new campaign, you want to start a new system, the thing that you do not do is take 15 minutes and talk about the game's amazing logistics system that is built into it and how it's incredible. It's got this entire complex system that can model a shipping company's trials and tribulations, because you're not going to get a lot of people signing up for your game if you do.
And don't rave about how good the shipping prices were for the book, for the game, and you got it at a great shipping rate.
Just to go back to the point is, I was looking at that to see how the pricing would be and explaining how expensive it is just to even make these games and ship them. And I was amazed that they're making this for $29. And like, as opposed to you go some places and the shipping costs more than this actual game will cost, which is incredible.
I see people in chat are saying logistics of the RPG, please. When? All right, I got it for you. It's called Traveler. Go play Traveler.
That is true. That is 100% true. Planes, trains, and automobiles, the role-playing game. That would be actually a pretty good game, I think.
I think you want to go with a known brand name.
Fine.
So maybe
Cannonball
call it the Ticket to
Run.
the Ticket to Ride RPG.
Oh, Ticket to Ride RPG, yeah.
Right? You go with that, and you're like, now we're gonna be role playing as those people in Ticket to Ride.
I would rather do Cannonball Run, the RPG.
No one knows that game.
Well, you mean the movie?
Oh yeah.
Well, because I'm old as hell and it's from the 70s. So I'll do one last one and then we'll start. This is my favorite one. Are you ready? Chick-fil-A is looking for someone to help them make board games. That's right. Chick-fil-A has gaming producer. And I will post the job posting. So Mark,
is this like the KFC dating sim?
I have no idea.
Wendy's RPG and
the Wendy's
old,
RPG
and the Old Spice.
The Wendy's RPG. Not only was it
Old Spice
legit,
Pathfinder
it's
class.
gone. Like they put up and they made all these URLs and then they wiped it off the face of the earth, which is a travesty. I never understood. Like what was it, The Green Man, or that movie? It was like the Green Knight. They made a huge RPG of that thing, and then it just disappeared. And I was like, who is spending all this time and energy and money to make this incredibly complex printed RPG off one movie, and then it's just gone? I mean, they're spending thousands of hours on this thing, and then... Anyhow, if you want to make a game based on Chick-fil-A, there's the posting. They need a game producer, and they are looking for someone, the entertainment producer over gaming, or game producers, a new full-time position, Chick-fil-A, charged with overseeing the day-to-day creative exploration, development, production of original games from Chick-fil-A. Could be including video games, console, mobile, free-to-play, or other digital activities, as well as analog games, including board games, card games, and other family group activities.
I know. All right. Listen, my company is in the process of being bought and sold. And so, if I find myself out on the unemployment line, maybe I'll know where to throw my resume in the hat.
You got to be in Atlanta.
Oh, well, then no.
That's not a bad. Hannah, you could apply.
Not going to Atlanta for it.
Why? What's so bad with Atlanta? I mean, other than the horrible traffic, but it's...
To be fair, it can't be much worse than Oklahoma.
Ooh. I've been to Atlanta many times.
I've heard Chick-fil-A is a kind of nasty company, though, to be fair.
I've heard they're great to work for.
They are great to work for, but their ownership and key members of their company have some fairly conservative / right-wing beliefs, so that can offset some people's
yes, but they're supposed to be
a good nugget.
Yeah, it's true. They are supposed to be very good to work for. In fact, they get, let me just do quick, is that they get something like they franchises. They get something like 200,000 applicants a year for their franchises, and then
That's a lot.
I know, and they only give out like 100 a year. So if you get one, it's like the jackpot. So
my good friend has what I consider to be the winning combination, which is he loves Chick-fil-A. He loves their spicy chicken sandwich, and but of course it's ultimately it is fast food, right? So he doesn't want to go there all the time, and he also doesn't like that he supports that company because of some of the things that they do with their money. So as a dual-pronged approach, what he does is throughout the entire course of the year, if he goes to Chick-fil-A, which he does, he saves his receipts, and then at the end of the year, he gathers up all of his receipts. He sums them up, and he makes an equivalent donation to Planned Parenthood.
That is so extra.
So not only does it double the cost of his Chick-fil-A essentially, right? But he also feels like it's like a carbon offset,
Hey, something wrong with that. I would have more to say about Chick-fil-A. I've only been to it a few times, and I do love them every time I go because they're really good. There's none near me, but
I don't really go because the lines are always so long.
I don't
but
have one in New York, but down the street from me, there was like this big bank. They knocked it down. There's a big empty lot, and I saw the sign, and I was like, "Oh, it says coming soon on this location, Chick-fil-A." I was like, "Oh boy, that is going to be one crowded location." Like where I live is so densely packed. There's going to be lines a mile long, Derik.
Yeah, sorry, Hannah.
No, I was slightly off topic. If you want Chick-fil-A and you don't want to buy it, but you want to kind of recreate it at home, soak your chicken in pickle juice.
Oh, really?
Like marinate it in pickle juice, and then it doesn't taste like pickles, though, does it?
No. Well, I get the spicy one too.
Delicious.
Yeah, but I get the spicy one with the pickles.
Ooh, yes. I hate pickles. Wow, that's interesting. I will tell you a fun story, and then we'll get to the main topic. I lived right next door to the original Shake Shack. Shake Shack. Before the whole burger thing, took off, all these fancy burger places. And I don't even know if any of you guys were even alive back then. But anyhow, some of you. So basically, the creator of Shake Shack is one of these, it's a world famous chef. And there was a park right near me on 20th Street in Manhattan. That was kind of a rundown park, but it was in a really good location in Manhattan. It was on 23rd and 5th, and it's like great. It's right next to the Triangle building. I'm sure you've seen that, the Flatiron building, and that building is really flat. It's right across the street. And they were trying to bring Manhattan back, and this is back in the 90s. So he had this idea of like, I'll build a station just for burgers and shakes, and that's it. And it was very limited, the menu. The line for the original Shake Shack was, no joke, like 3 Manhattan avenues, not blocks, avenues long. Like it would go down for like half a mile. Just give you an idea. One avenue is 3 blocks and 19 blocks is a mile. So there would be lines just going down 23rd Street from like 5th Avenue to like 7th Avenue just for a freaking Shake Shack burger. And I used to see that all the time. I lived right next to it. And I'm like, how good can they be? I mean, these are people in Manhattan waiting hours for this damn thing. I presume that's what it's going to be like when they open up the only Chick-fil-A within 100 miles of where I live that we're going to be having. I'm sure there's going to be cars across the street from my house, even though Chick-fil-A's probably like 3 miles away. So,
look, Americans are so boring. Like when a new grocery store opens up, people line up to be like, "Oh, I'm going to go in there and buy eggs."
Don't
Only
knock
if it's chic,
Wegmans.
though.
There's a Wegmans near me, and the line is crazy.
This is just pure late stage. Anyways,
it is American late stage capitalism at its finest. Let me tell you.
Exactly.
Anyhow,
but anyways,
let's get to the main topic. I will probably be very quiet because I am terrible, even though I was a very good teacher at complex subjects like computers and interactive animation and programming. I don't know how good I actually am, because the way I play with people is I like to do groupthink. I'll just tell the way I like to do. Whenever we're trying to learn something new, I often will ask that we all watch, and I'll come up with some certain videos and stuff, and we all watch them together. So we all have an idea of maybe how to play this new game. But I know that Mark knows how to teach people. Hannah has a background in education, and I am a Derik student of Hard Knocks, because Derik explained many games to me at Origins, so I got to see firsthand of Derik's way of explaining new games. And we played Oath, and I kind of know how to play Oath, but then you explained Oath to me. You explained Avatar: The Last Airbender to me. I think we played a few other games, but
we had the completely epic closest game of Root of all time.
I didn't know how to play Root, but I forgot, and so that was more of a refresher. But that Root game was like we're within 2 points of each other, that was the craziest game of Root ever. But I got to see firsthand, and Derik is superb at just explaining these things. So that's why I wanted you on here. And also Derik plays like a different game every single week, it seems like, and he
more or less.
So you guys are experts at explaining how to play new games and explain new rules to people and get people involved. And I'm one of those that I'm the school of hard knocks of just learn the damn thing and let's just figure this out. And I hope you guys know how to play, and between the 5 of us, we'll figure it out. That's how
but that's usually not the best way.
No. My way is bad. I'm telling you, my way's terrible. Don't do my way.
Maybe actually the worst way. Well, no, I guess there's a way that's worse than that. But
don't know the rules and open them up at the table and learn them right then and there. That's probably worse.
So
I think it's pretty common though.
Yes, that's why we're having this video. That's who don't do what I do. Maybe you guys can teach people the right way.
Be like Steve.
Don't be like me. I'm terrible.
I'd be really interested to see what Hannah's perspective is, especially as a professional educator and someone who is obviously in the TTRPG space. But from my perspective, I think there's a conversation to be had before we talk about that, which is the sort of the precursor to that, and that is the old adage, right? You can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. The buy-in for the game has to start before the game. I think role-playing games are at their best when you have active and engaged players and active engaged game masters. If anybody there, including sometimes this happens to GMs too, doesn't want to be there. I understand that some people can buckle down because they need to do it for school, they need to do it for their job, they need to do it for their wife or their husband or their partner. Totally fine. I get it. That's the way life works. At the end of the day, this is a voluntary hobby activity. And a lot of times, and I've seen this happen more often than not, somebody, let's use the classic situation, right? You've got a 5e campaign and somebody says, hey guys, I've heard a lot of great things about Pathfinder 2nd Edition and we're not happy with the direction that WotC's moving. Let's try Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And a bunch of people are like, oh, I heard it's really complicated or whatever. And then you have one player who very clearly doesn't want to play. But they basically come anyways because it's their Friday night and they want to hang out. And they don't pay attention and they don't learn the rules. And it's a horrible experience and everyone's looking up things and they're being problematic. And at the end, everyone kind of goes, yeah, that wasn't that fun. Let's go back to 5e. And the person goes, yeah, see, I told you it was going to be a bad experience. And it's like, well, no, it was a bad experience because of you and because of your attitude and because of your unwillingness to sort of be an active and engaged player. You could have just stayed at home. But there's social dynamics at work here beyond just playing with a group of people. You're like, this is my group, come hell or high water. So there's a certain level of like, we're not going to exclude our player. Maybe we don't have that big of a group, or I've known this person for 20 years, or whatever the situation, or it's my girlfriend or it's my boyfriend. So
Derik, you're moving into the main thing I wanted to cover before we got into the topic of how to teach as well, which is how to teach players a new RPG depends on who it is. And you need to know who you're talking to. Is it someone you just met at a convention? Because as I have done sometimes in my job, your job is to just like barker people over from who are walking through the convention to a table, sit them down and teach them a game? Or is it people that you deeply know because they're your friends or family and you understand their motivations and what they like? Or is it somewhere in between those two extremes? Because the best way to teach changes dramatically depending on that situation.
By the way, we should have had the rules lawyer on here.
Oh, he definitely teaches a lot of people to play as well. He would have been a great choice.
I know.
Yeah.
No, it's a double joke because it's like he's the rules lawyer. He knows all the rules, but he actually teaches a lot of people, and he's pretty good.
Well,
at
he ran like a after school program for a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Time and taught them
100%.
Oops.
These were like middle schoolers, I think, predominantly.
And I would have liked to have.
Listen, Ronald's busy climbing the YouTube ladder and becoming the new king of Pathfinder 2. So
he is. He's getting up there. He's getting
doing great.
No, he's doing really great.
The other one,
I think he's kind of become the go-to. I think he's now the face of Pathfinder 2 on YouTube.
Not us.
Or no, it
well,
used to be No Nat.
It used to be
It
No
was
Nat.
No
I'm
Nat,
saying
yeah.
It was
wasn't.
never us,
There was
Steven.
never
We're like
us.
a news show that also
No.
covers other stuff.
We're too analytical and
Yeah,
cover
I'm
too
just
many
saying. I think
things.
that No Nat obviously has some shifting priorities and some shifting desires, but Rules Lawyer, I think, is if anything has doubled down on his on
definitely.
his niche, and so I think he's getting the just rewards for that. But anyways, he would have been good because he's really smart.
Yeah. Anyhow.
But
What
anyways,
about
yes,
Hannah? What do you did you teach?
Yeah.
Didn't you teach kids or
I'm sure
high
you teach people who
schoolers,
don't
or-
want to be taught all the time.
Yeah.
So I was a 9th and 10th grade English teacher, but my student teaching was a 12th grade class, which is
Whoa.
you're only 3 or 4 years older than them. So that's a little weird. But for 12th graders, right when I start talking, for 12th graders specifically, one of the biggest things is they're done. They know if they're graduating, they know how to write a paper. They might not be good at it, but they're done. And so one of the biggest struggles with 12th graders is engaging them and convincing them to try a little bit, trying to make it sound fun. And it's less about the teaching, because if they have the motivation to do it, they'll learn the stuff. It's just getting them to do it. And in a group where you're playing games together, and you play games hopefully with people who want to play games. Maybe they specifically want to play D&D. But I'm thinking one of the biggest things I've seen, you mentioned the person who brings that bad attitude and who shows up. They don't want to try this game. They don't want to be kicked out of the group. They want to hang out with their friends. They want to be present, but they're going to have a bad attitude. I think there's a much bigger impact on the flip side when you have the really positive person in a group. Because a really positive person, if you just put one in there who's like, oh, this could be really cool, guys. This could be really fun. I think we should do it. If they have a big enough presence, I think people lean towards that. There's a natural creativity, a natural interest, a natural curiosity, and they want the vibes to be good. It's a game night. We're supposed to be having fun. And so I think as a DM, it's really hard to convince people to play a game that they don't want to play. I mean, you can do all sorts of engagement strategies and techniques, but a lot of it comes down to at least one player being the one who pulls the others. One of your students being the one who says, well, what if it's not that bad? Like, come on, guys. It's just a group project. We can hang out together, you know?
Yeah. No, I think you're right, because getting that kind of group buy-in is really important. But I think when you were talking, Hannah, it kind of made me think about something, which is the premise of this whole video, which is how do you learn or teach a new to your players? Does that imply then that it's always the game master that has to be the initiator of this stuff?
I don't think it should be. I mean, in our group, we have I'm saying that wrong. We have a DM who he had played for several years and didn't have a group anymore. And so he found us, the group that we now form, have played for 3 years now, and said, none of you, one other person had played D&D a bit. And he said, well, what if we all got together, played some D&D? I will teach it to you. And we wanted to hang out together. So we did it. And now I'm currently running the main campaign in the group. So I've become a DM. His girlfriend has DM'd for us now. Our other friend who had also had a history in D&D, she's DM now. I think over half the group by this point is DMs. Because if you do a good job, you motivate people and they're like, oh, well, that looks really fun. And then they look into the D&D world, they get sucked into it. They see a new book, a new game that they think sounds really fun. And they know that the current DM's not going to play it. And so it's up to them to bring it to the table and say, hey, I saw this on D&D social media. I would really like to run it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that a healthy group, in many cases, often winds up with rotating GMs, but not always. Sometimes you can have a very healthy group with just one who's the forever. But I think that from a matter of just sheer the logistics of the situation, even in Hannah's example, that person who was experienced, it sounds like GM at the very beginning before it started rotating around and being everybody. So the reason why the person who's teaching it is usually the first GM is just because, like, think about it. If you have one person who knows the game, brings it onto the table and says, all right, guys, I'm going to teach you all how to play. All right, you all know how to play. Now, Derik, you're the GM. Like, it puts that other person on the spot who didn't know how to play until right before. Derik would probably do it, though, because it's Derik. But, like, a lot of people might not want to do that right now. It's like, wait a minute, you taught us how. You know how to do it. Can you at least GM, like, a little bit so that we get a sense for what the game is since you're experienced with it or you know it? And that's going to get into one of my first tips for teaching. And to start off, obviously, the first thing I said was you need to know who you're teaching it to. And if you have someone who's different and who has a different learning style, you need to make sure that you teach it correctly for them. In fact, the learning style I'm about to talk about does not work as well for me as other techniques, but works the best for most people. And so if you're just doing it with random people you found at a convention, this is what you want to do. You want to have something set up generally that has made the character building decisions and other sorts of decisions for the players. That is a very brief demo of how it works in play, rather than making them read through a lot of text. In particular, it would behoove you, if possible, to have some kind of physical representation that can represent anything that you think is kind of new or interesting that you want the players to latch onto. For example, when we were designing the beginner box for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, I did some research.
Which is incredible, by the way, Mark. It's like the best beginner box ever.
Well, I think we all worked together really well on that one. And I did some research. Paizo sent me off doing education research on, like, how can you make sure this works well for new players and kids too? Because, like we say, that it can be for an acquisition product that kids can use amongst themselves. And one of the main things I found is if you have anything that's abstract in a game, you want to make a physical representation. So Pathfinder is known for its 3-action system where you can take 3 actions per turn. So I had them include a little card with circles where you place down 3 tokens for your 3 actions and then a little token for your reaction that you can use once per round, which, like D&D, Pathfinder has that. And you pull it off as you've used them to show that your turn has been taken so that people see and feel and manipulate in front of them a physical representation of their turn. And this, if you have a physical representation combined with a setup where they don't have to read everything because you've pre-built some things and then you let them go through a little demo, it's kind of what video games have learned to do with tutorial levels rather than instruction manuals. Now, I say that as the instruction manual guy who learns much better from an instruction manual, but we are an endangered species.
Yeah, I that is exactly correct. And I think having those kind of physical representations of things and being able to point to things, and say, like, oh, see, this is, you have 2 actions. Well, you still have 1 action left. Look, there's a little thing on your sheet. I think that is so valuable. And I love the way that the beginner box was created. I think having those doodads, but, I think it kind of loops back, and this could be more of a discussion point, is to pre-gen or not to pre-gen. If you're sitting down with a new group of players, let's assume you're the game master. Maybe you're not even that familiar with the game system. You've been watching YouTube videos, you've been reading the book, but you're finally ready to run the group through some sort of intro adventure or some sort of demo adventure. So much of what we associate with role-playing games is associated with, like, making my own character, making this is me, and getting that level of connection. But also, character creation can take a lot of time these days, like a lot of time. And it's probably easily one of the most rules burdensome components of the game. So, but I've also seen people say that, like, pre-gens, they just hate playing pre-gens. They don't want to play somebody else's character. They want to play their own character. So I'm curious what you all think about, new players and the pre-gen.
I think a lot of it just depends on the players themselves. When I was tutoring, I had this high school girl who had recently started playing D&D with her friends, and they don't have a single rule book. None of them have read one. None of them know what's going on at all. One of their friends just wanted to play one, and so they created this, like, castle murder mystery game. And I asked her, I said, oh, well, that's, as a player, that's super cool. What character did you make? And she goes, oh, I'm and I was like, so do you cast spells or do you hit things? She goes, oh, I hit things. And so I listed the martial classes and I got to fight her. She's like, that one, that's it. And I was like, well, what race are you? And she goes, I think I'm an elf. And I was like, okay. Do you have like a backstory? Which of course it's less important to have a backstory, especially when you're fresh and new. But I was trying to figure out what she knew. Not a single person at this table has a single stat block, a single bit of knowledge about any spells. They're just going for it. And she said that it is harder to get people to show up. One, because they're high schoolers, and two, because they just don't have any foundation and they're kind of lost. But at the same time, they're having a lot of fun. But I think pre-made characters would have served them really well. A list of like, this is what you can do. This, I mean, if nothing else, like you can change the background of this character if you want to, but here's the things you can do with your character.
Yeah,
I agree with Hannah. I think that Derik, the answer to this conundrum is that artful pre-generated character design. And I'm not going to say that Pathfinder necessarily does it in the way I'm about to say it doesn't, because it has a brand of these iconic characters that it needs to, it has different goals on those pre-gens. Artful pre-generated character design can allow you to have your cake and eat it too for an introductory adventure. And the way you do that, exactly what Hannah says, you get the rules and mechanics that are out there so that they don't have to page through the book, all the classes, make all those decisions. And then you have whatever is necessary to kind of hook the character into this pre-generated adventure, but you literally leave questions. So suppose the adventure is that the party has like accepted a bounty on a bandit stronghold. So then like you can put in the character's thing, it's like, why did your character accept this bounty? Or you can ask a question that's a yes or no question and let them answer it yes or no. Like for the thief, the rogue character, you can be like, was your character a former member of this bandit group who went rogue against them from a rival group that they destroyed, or something else? And then that will give them a few things they can think of and be like, oh yeah, now I see what I want to choose. So you can leave blanks with questions that are directed, that you ask them to make a quick answer to that. You could even go around the table, have them each answer one of the questions that you left on their pre-gen sheet in a circle, and then go back, and then the next person answers their next question so they can see it in advance as the circle is going around, and they can learn a bit about themselves.
I completely agree with that. I mean, Powered by the Apocalypse would say, draw maps, leave blanks, right? And I've seen this done in a lot of PBTA games with has pre-gens, where you'll have a pre-generated character and it basically does 90% of the work for you. But then there's just a couple of either like narrative questions, like, you served in the army defending Stonebridge. Why did you leave? And it's sort of a leading question, right? It presumes that your character left for some reason. Now, that why I read that reason is, and then there might even be a thing where it's like, if you left under good terms, increase this stat by 1. If you left under bad terms, increase another stat by 1. And so you get this little like miniature customization there that kind of can help you cement your feeling of ownership of it without overwhelming you with the rules.
There's actually a pedagogical name for what y'all are describing. It's, well, I don't know if this is the official name, but I was taught it as I do, we do, you do. So I create the majority of your character. I show you how it works. I show you how combat works. We do. I ask you some questions, start to clarify, start to narrow down, give you some agency, and then you do. You take over the character. You can create a new one if you decide you don't like it, but you get the system now. And it's this slowly pushing off of responsibility onto the player to take care of their own character.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm learning so much.
Now, what is it? And again, I'm learning a lot from Mark and Hannah as well. What's interesting, and this is something I have often struggled with myself. So you mentioned I taught you to play Oath, to play board games, and I've taught infinite board games to people over the many years.
He's still teaching right now.
I'm teaching one right now. And my style for teaching board games is pretty much always the same. And I always start, because I think the biggest mistake people make when they teach board games is they start going, on your turn, you can take 8 actions. Okay, you can gather wood, or you could do this. It's like, but they don't care. They don't care that they can get. They don't even know why they're gathering wood. So I always start with, what is this game's objective? What is it that you're trying to do? You're trying to get victory points. So then it kind of begs the natural question. Okay, so how do I get victory points? Great. There are 3 ways that you can get victory points. You can build homes, you can grow your family, or you can go to work. And it's like, okay, So now when I start talking about actions, I can say, and that might help you build your home, or that might help you go to work, and that'll get you victory points, and that's how you win the game. So that's like a very, like, I start from the back, you know, like, and to be clear,
no, you're starting top down.
Yeah. And to be fair, most modern good board game designs now, you know, sort of do that way. And interestingly, by the way, to your point, Mark, like a lot of games, like from like leader games, like Root and Oath, they now basically give you like, hey, here's the rule book. If you just want to read the rules in a, you know, reference sheet order, and then here's another book, which is like the walkthrough demo of like a first round of play. So it's like they give you both people options.
Actually, I was going to ask you that. What do you think of that whole? And this is more in board games, although it would be interesting. I haven't really seen it done in role-playing games except for beginner boxes of like,
Just
read this
turn.
first, and then here's like intro games. But I have a conflicted version of that because many of those intro games don't have the full version of the game.
Right.
And you might only play the game once or twice in your entire life. So that might not that might be the best way to learn, because now it's like, okay, now let's play the real game. And you're like, you know, and the real game might be much more fun than the intro version of the game.
Right.
You know?
Yes. And you're leaving some stuff on the table. And to be clear, I mean, I wanted to finish my point, but that's a really good one. Because what I was going to say is that when I play role-playing games, the challenge that I have sometimes is explaining, especially for people who are new to the hobby, what is the goal of this? Like, what is it that you are trying to do, right? Because RPGs are, you know, notoriously nebulous in sort of the approach. You're like, well, because you could say, well, you're trying to beat the bad guy, but that sort of sets up the wrong, I think, impression that this game is about defeating. It's like it's a video game. You're trying to beat Bowser. No, like it's a role-playing game. There is more to it than just being the game where you beat the bad guy. There is this idea of inhabiting a character and making actions that are in line with, it's sort of this symbiosis between you and your PC.
I think your trouble with that comes from when I thought your top-down approach was really good for board games, but you were missing one small thing that I was going to talk about.
Okay.
And then it was fascinating because that became literally the exact problem for tabletop role-playing games, which is I would also say, instead of being like, let's start with your 8 actions in this game, I would also say your goal in this game is to acquire the most victory points. But then I would add by having the best farm, but I would add some kind of high concept flavor description of it. And then, whereas you would say your goal is to get the most victory points, hard stop. 3 ways to get victory points are building a bigger farm, having jobs, and doing this other thing. But I would try to give it a flavor, kind of a lore aspect to it from the moment they started. And if you are doing that when you're explaining board games, then that is a more similar analog in tabletop role-playing games, where you can say your goal is to tell a collective story together where your characters are, let's say in this case, heroes who are fighting against a great evil or something like that.
And more specifically, to tell a story together. You are playing an individual character, so it's your job to play that character as you described it, as it makes sense, as you would have fun playing it, but one who is specifically in an adventuring party, working with other people. What is your character's role in this party? How are they benefiting the party? Because one thing I've seen with new people joining D&D is they want to play a character and they're used to video games where it's a little main character syndrome. And it's not always like it doesn't ruin the game all the time. Like, it's not a horrible thing, but I see people have so much more fun when they realize the point is to be part of that group. And I think that needs to be explained more thoroughly when entering the D&D or RPG space.
You know what actually I thought was good, which is a weird segue, but if you saw Stranger Things, remember there was like season 2, and they had what was her name? Sam? Was that her name? The new kid, and they wanted to introduce her Max. I knew it was like a boy's name, and they wanted to introduce her to the game, and they're trying to explain the rules to her, and she's just like, "I'm a Zoomer." They're like, "Oh, that's not a class." It's like, "I'm a Zoomer," and then that was it. And I was like, she's in a bad way to show like how to teach a game. Just like go with it, you know. Like if they want to play and that's how they want to play, just figure it out. Especially for a role playing game. And
and that gets to something that I actually did a stream once. Maybe it was a video. I don't know. It was a long time ago. It was near the beginning of my channel, where I basically talked about like what, you know, if you're bringing someone new into an RPG, you know, what would you teach them? D&D or Pathfinder? And my answer was neither. And I said, because I think a game like, and the example game I used was Fate Accelerated Edition, which is like a 10 or 20 page book, and a character sheet, could fit, like, it's not even a full sheet of paper, and it's only got like 7 things on it. But it's very flavorful, and it's very evocative, and it's very easy as a player to say, like, okay, look, the ability score, constitution and charisma, and no, it's like in Fate Accelerated Edition, it's like you have like tough, smart, quick, like it's very, very, like, you get what this is trying to do. And in that game, there's no skill system, and you have to roll with this thing. You just describe what your character's doing, and then you and the GM and whatever say, oh, that sounds like you should make a quick roll because you're trying to be nimble. You could do it any way you want. You could open the door quickly. You could open the door smartly. You could open the door, strongly, as long as it makes sense. And so to me, that really teaches that core key element that I think if people enjoy that, they will enjoy RPGs, which is this kind of, collaborative building exercise where it's like, oh, I want to lead with the fiction. I believe strongly in fiction first gaming, and board games are the opposite of fiction first gaming, right? In board games, you're playing to achieve the objective. The mechanics are first. I love Oath. One of the reasons I love Oath is because you can play a mechanics first game, and then a story kind of emerges after the fact. But I find that role-playing games work best when people are staying fiction first.
It feels like the difference between teaching math versus teaching English. One, you're focused on the mechanics. One, you're focused on the story. But math often has a story that emerges. English often, very often, has mechanics that emerge. And so whatever your player's priority is, it's going to be easier to teach them a game that aligns with that preference.
I agree with Hannah. And I would say that Fate is good for some players. Absolutely. It's simpler, and that's a plus. I really like Fate, and I've mentioned this on the stream before. I ran it for multiple groups. One of the groups, we had a blast, and the other group, it just didn't work because just the way that they played was more mechanical. It wasn't the right game to teach them.
Right.
And that's something I learned which is why I started by saying you need to know who your players are, because if those were their first experience to role-playing games, well, actually, maybe they would have done better with it. Maybe the games they played is what made them do worse at it. Maybe.
Right.
But assuming that there's some aspect of their personality and play style in other games that bled into that, it might have meant that they didn't want to play tabletop role-playing games after that because it wasn't the right match for what they wanted. They wanted something that was more concrete and that gave them an excuse to use a variety of different things that did not force me to contrive it. Whereas with Fate, they would just have a very high score in one of those, and they would just find an excuse to use that for literally everything, essentially. And I could find a way to maybe sometimes make them not do that, but most of the time it didn't. And there was a lot of repetition with those players. Whereas my other group were great. They were constantly doing all sorts of things, and it was easy to run them through Fate. So I would say when you're teaching, it comes back to what you said too, Derik, is you need to find the right people who are open to it, and what I said, which is their preferences and what they work well with.
Well,
yeah,
I am learning a lot, and I will say that all of our games, Derik, were absolutely insane. That Oath game was nuts. And best of all, whenever you play a game with me and Derik, always make sure you're the weirdo who walks up to you while we're playing a game and starts telling us how we're playing it incorrectly and start giving us advice.
Yeah, that was great. Actually, we brought that up on the stream yesterday because our patron Sean was in the chat, and Sean is the guy who played both sides. He played you and he played me and
right.
Smith.
Yeah, I remember.
And he somehow got promises and free swag and free dinners from both of us.
I gave him the free the dice case.
Yeah, and we agreed to buy his dinner.
Right.
This was, by the way, Steven, let's be clear. Steven was doing this to bribe this player in the board game to support his bid for the throne.
Let me
basically.
explain an oath. There was 5 against 1, and I almost won.
Actually, that actually
It's
checks
like
out.
they had to literally all 5 people had to gang up on me, and they still barely beat me. So
You were a tyrannical, despotic ruler, and we were the heroic heroes, exiles of the realm, and we needed to bring you to heel. But
barely.
yeah, but,
My armies were destroying yours. That was a good
but
game.
see, even like as you're saying it, like that's what I love about role playing games. But this is what I like about board games too. I like that the story that emerges afterwards, it feels like something that happened, and it feels like it's this really cool moment. And that's what I really love for players to sort of get to experience in their first role playing session. I don't want them to think role playing games is flipping through rule books and
Right.
looking up, how grapple works. I want them to feel like it's just like,
Yeah, but then they won't have the real experience.
They'll learn as they need to.
yeah, don't tell them Santa Claus isn't real yet. Just let them.
Hey, I didn't know that. By the way,
Just
here's a super chat. That's probably the only person who can answer this is Mark, because you probably wrote this. Did you see this?
Yeah.
Glade Riven.
Glade Riven wonders. Pathfinder 2's original core book has it says playing the game. Page 443 and page 397 in player core. Do you think there's a hurdle to new players because TLDR? So I think that, and Dungeons and Dragons has the same thing, where there's a part that's about the actual gameplay that is usually short and is not right at the beginning. The problem is from a book organization perspective, and it's what Derik and Stephen were getting into with the 2 books, read this first. If you had a 2-book box set with a read this first, you could put the game rules at the beginning of it. But when you have one player's handbook or core book, you actually kind of can't put the playing the game stuff first, because not everyone's going to agree to play a pre-generated character. And if you don't have a pre-generated character, you absolutely need to know the steps of building a character before you can play the game, because you can't play the game without a character. So if you had a quick start guide or the beginner box or something like that, you absolutely can put playing the game pretty early on and be like, we're assuming for your first game, you're playing these pre-generated characters. Here are the rules, and go right into playing the game. But if you don't do that, you can't. That's just from an organization standpoint, it's actually pretty rough if it starts going directly into playing the game, but you don't even have your character. And so you kind of don't know what to look at. If you have a pre-gen sheet to look at, then you can navigate playing the game pretty well.
By the way, Sean's in the chat.
I did see Sean's.
Oh yeah, he said a super chat. I was a mercenary who could be bought.
And he was.
And he played his role very well. Life imitating art.
I think he won the
sure.
game, actually.
He was the real winner.
He was the real winner because he got a free dice case and dinner out of that.
Right. But no. So I generally find that for me personally, when I'm teaching a role playing game, it's because, and again, my experience here is teaching people games that aren't your standard D20 affair, and I'm doing it because there is a mechanic or a series of mechanics or a series of game options or rules or whatever that I find really, really, really interesting, and I find really, really, really compelling. And maybe this is my flaw, but when I teach a game, I want, how can I phrase this? I want the players to gain that sense of appreciation for the game, and really appreciate it for what it's doing and how it's doing it. So I guess it's like a silly thing, but it's like the metaphor would be, you're taking your friend to the art museum to show them your favorite piece by Monet, and you're like, see, look how beautiful it is. And they go, yeah, it's really pretty. And you're like, no, I need you to understand why it's pretty. I need you to understand what he was doing and why the colors and right. And you're like, I want you to have that elevated level of consciousness that will allow you to appreciate it on this deeper level. And so for me, when we were playing Avatar, now I had the advantage that all of you were seasoned role-playing games. When we sat down to play Avatar: The Last Airbender, Stephen, it's important for me to explain that this game is fundamentally about balance and about your character being torn between two ideals or two principles. And if you look at the moves, the mechanics of the game, they are designed specifically to interface with that character sort of journey between being pushed to one side and pulled to another side, and that your own emotional self-doubts and the world around you and your own friends are going to try to pull you off of your center. And you can choose to go with that, and that has certain advantages and certain consequences, or you could choose to resist it, which has certain advantages, certain consequences. But either way, the choices that you make are going to be mechanically supported by the game. And when we're all done, it's going to feel like an Avatar story. And so and I think that my take on that is I think the game does that really well. And so for me, it's important to draw those connecting lines. I don't want to, I am probably guilty of giving too much detail about the rules, because I think I'm like, oh, these mechanics are so great, and what they do is so amazing. But I do think showing players why the watch works, like opening up the case and letting them see the gears a little bit, I think is important to me. I don't know.
So I'm going to support you on that, Derik, because while I did not have like a random person teach me how to play Avatar: The Last Airbender role-playing game, my little brother did at Gen Con. And he had 2 games. The first GM did it, and he was like, I don't really like this much. And then the second GM taught it to him, and he was like, there's a balance system. The first GM just didn't even use it. And he was like, the entire game is based on this.
Yep.
The first GM decided. And he was like, in retrospect, the first GM did say there was some other complicated stuff. I'm just going to skip it because you're learning the game for the first time. But my little brother was like, this is infuriating, because I did not get a good sense of what the game was. If I hadn't been signed up for it twice, I might have never. And I did not get to learn what the game was, because he made up in his mind what he was going to cut out. And it was actually the entire balancing factor that made the entire game work. So I would say another important thing is, if you are not a professional game designer or a professional or like very experienced in teaching the game, don't go off on your own and decide to remove components of it when you're first trying to teach new players what they're doing, and be like, well, this part is too complicated, so I'm just going to leave it out. Because you could run into issues like what happened with my little brother in the same example game you gave.
Yeah. The best example of this ever, I remember years ago, someone taught me how to play Dune, the old board game. And Dune, the board game, at the beginning of the game, you get these treachery cards. And it represents one person from another house who is secretly in your employ, and you know it, no one else knows it, and you can use it during the game to really screw somebody over. And House Harkonnen has 4 of these, so they're really, they have moles and traitors everywhere, and it creates this hyper level of treachery and suspicion and whatever. But when I first played the game, the person said, I didn't know, they didn't like that system, so they didn't teach me that system. And I remember feeling like, man, that's like such a critical part of Dune. The whole first book is about who's betraying the Duke and who, and it changed the whole timbre of the game, just because this person who was teaching it didn't like that rule. And it's like, that's great for you to make that decision. But what about me, who isn't playing the game, has never played the game before? I'd like to be able to make that decision on my own. So I completely agree with you, Mark. I think, the game should be presented. Now, that raises an interesting question, Mark. I don't know that Pathfinder 2 box set shies away from this, but I see plenty of box sets, intro box sets, starter sets. Legend of the Five Rings, game I love. Its beginner's box set does not have what I would call the full rules. It does not get into the nitty gritty of every nuance of Legend of the Five Rings, because there's a lot. So,
but the game's designers in that case took it apart, analyzed it, and produced a product that they thought could get the entire theme of what they wanted to without some of the rules. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, yes, that's a really good point. So yeah, like if it's still coming from that place of expertise and knowledge and careful consideration, and like you said, this doesn't have to be just be a professional game designer, but if you're, unless you consider yourself, without any sort of inflated ego, as being really, really, really good at this and having a lot of experience, my advice is leave it to the pros.
It's also the passion for the game in its entirety. Loving a game for what it fully is and being willing to teach that to new players with a passion. And I haven't really taught any RPGs to other people, but I have taught people who don't want to learn things passion is infectious. And if you love the heart and the history behind something, you'll get that buy-in. And sometimes if you have to hold out a carrot for them and get them hooked another way, teaching Shakespeare, ninth graders don't want to read Romeo and Juliet. I'm sorry. I don't know if y'all can hear my cat trying to destroy my kitchen.
No, we cannot.
Nope.
Oh, good. But they don't want to read Romeo and Juliet. And so what you tell ninth graders is, hey, guys, this story is full of dick jokes. And they say, really?
Wow.
And you say, oh, yeah. And so then as you start reading it, normally they wouldn't care, but they're looking. And as they're looking, they're forced to at least try to comprehend everything they're reading. Because what if there's a dick joke in there? They want to laugh about that. And then once that happens, they start to ask questions. Well, wait, is this one person doing this one thing? Is this one? And then they start to get invested in the story and the heart of it. And I think that's just kind of two ways that you can go about it. One, personal passion, teaching them everything and hoping they'll get on board with you. Or two, showing them you can play a fun character, and then trusting that your love for the game and a natural curiosity in a good game will pull them into it the rest of the way.
I must have been a weird kid because I loved Romeo and Juliet.
I loved Romeo and Juliet as well. We read it in eighth grade.
I read it in
we also read it in eighth grade.
I read it in ninth grade. Well, my favorite play of all time growing up and movie was West Side Story, which I did not know.
Right.
It's just Romeo and Juliet.
And Juliet.
Right. And then I saw that and I'm like, oh, this is fantastic.
There you go.
So, there you go.
I was also a big Shakespeare fan growing up, so I guess we were the three people who would have been no problem in Hannah's class.
Oh yeah, I've been like, dick jokes. That's nothing. Wait till you read this part here. It's
I like his histories and his tragedies. I don't really like the comedies.
Oh my God, Twelfth Night's fantastic.
Twelfth Night. I miss me on Twelfth Night.
Oh, but, Twelfth Night is so good.
What about Midsummer Night's Dream?
Yeah, the comedies, the only comedy, the only Shakespeare comedy that I like is 10 Things I Hate About You. But
fair enough.
Which is
Taming of the Shrew.
Taming of the Shrew.
Right.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think that Hannah made a really excellent point, because I think at the end of the day, the reason I'm successful at teaching people role-playing games is because I'm really fucking hyped about them. And like, I just, that like, if you're teaching somebody and it seems like you don't want to be there, how can you expect for them to want to be there? Right. So, again, this is the reason my sister is a teacher. One of the reasons I think that being a teacher is the hardest job is because you have to overcome that inertia, and you have to do it for 15, 20, 25 kids. It's like such a tremendously difficult thing, and you have to kind of be like excited about it, because if you're not gonna, then they're not gonna be. But so when it comes to role-playing games, if I'm bringing a game to you, this is because this is something that is important to me, and I think it's interesting, and I'm excited to play with you, and I'm excited to see you get to react to the game. And so, that I think that positivity becomes infectious. I think it gets people hyped to play.
We're having an interesting discussion because Hannah doesn't know this, but I have been well documented that every movie is a heist. And almost all stories are heists. And so they said, is Romeo and Juliet a heist? And we're saying, yes, everything's a heist. Everything.
So I disagree with Steven that everything's a heist, but Romeo and Juliet is for sure a heist. And it's a tragedy of the heist gone wrong, where the Friar and Juliet's part...
It is.
How many heist movies are like, and then we'll pretend that they're dead,
exactly.
and then smuggle out the thing that we want in the casket or something like that, right? It's like the heist goes wrong and the two sides collide, and it's a very tragic ending.
Yeah. It's absolutely it absolutely is fiasco. In fact, I would bet if you look, there's probably a fiasco playset, which is like, but soft, what light through yonder window breaks, and like it's a Romeo and Juliet or Shakespearean themed fiasco playset. I'm gonna look it up.
I'm sure there is.
Oh, yeah, Derek's like, he's like, but you know what, Derek?
Oh, I'll bring it to Origins.
I was gonna say, you're infectious.
It's called A Midsummer's Nightmare, Derik.
There you go. You're so right. Your infectious love of the game is why people watch your channel. Because you actually are when you
But
talk.
I'm known for being critical and negative, which is funny.
Yeah, but you know what? Everyone, yes and no, because you're as much critical and negative as we are. It's just that you're funnier about it.
I just wear my heart on my sleeve. You know, if I love something, I love it, and if I don't like something, I'm going to tell you I don't like it. Like I don't equivocate, and I'm not ambivalent about most things.
Ocean's 11 is just a Romeo and Juliet adaptation.
Even I don't know
Ocean's
if I
11 is one of my
agree.
favorite movies of all time.
I don't know if I agree that Derik is only the same amount negative as we are. I really think he's more negative than I am.
I was going to
And
say
I think
Mark is not. Mark is a pretty positive person, but I say, but if you add Mark and me together, we equal a Derik.
So you're that much more negative.
Sometimes.
But would you agree though that Mark, though, that you are prone to equivocate? That that you'll sort of I'm going to present both sides and avoid.
I definitely am prone to try to find a middle solution so that we look at things from multiple people's perspectives, because I don't think things are as cut and dry. So I would say yes. Equivocate is definitely loaded in terms of the way you talk about it, but I would say that presenting a compromise solution or a third path solution or answer analysis is what I do often on this show. So yes.
Well, spoken like a true professional as opposed to rank amateur over here, right?
Well, and what I'm thinking is, I saw someone post this in the comments too, is the more you know something, the more familiar you are, the more you're committed to it, the more you're going to know what of it is worth criticizing, because you want it to improve and you want it to be something good.
Oh my God, Hannah is like knocking out of the park today. Damn, that explains Derik to a T.
It's 100% correct.
Knows everything.
It's so correct. Like, listen, there have been times that at Paizo, like there would be people who were like online and writing what, if you like come down to it, their corpus of long statements work out to like 500,000 words probably of like diatribes that also do include analysis and things that they would like to see changed, and not just being angry about things, right? And I remember talking to like other people at Paizo who were like, wow, this person really hates our game, said one of them. And I was like, no, they really love it.
Right. Even
though literally those 500,000 words were negative and had things they would want to change, because there's no way that you write that many words about something that you just hate or you dislike. You just give it up. Hannah's absolutely right about that. So they love everything else about it that isn't in those 500,000 words. That's just not what they're talking about right now. They're talking about the parts that stick in their craw, because it could be even better if those were fixed. Like Derik loves Fabula Ultima, but he apparently fixed their initiative system. I'm curious what he did.
I told him that you fixed that Derik not only fixed the initiative system, but then the guy who wrote this game took Derik's initiative system and re-added it or something, didn't he?
Well, it's not an official errata, but Emmanuel, when we played, I was basically like, yeah, I don't like this initiative system, and I would do something different. And then I don't know that he actually saw that, or that was the reason for it, because there's other very smart people who are playing the game, but he decided to drop his initiative system.
What was your initiative system, or what was the fixed initiative system? I was still using the one that was in the first book.
Yeah, so the original initiative system was you make a group initiative check. The difficulty level is 10. If the players succeed, they go first. They get the first activation. If the players fail, the monsters get the first activation. In the new system, there is no initiative roll at all, and the players always go first unless there's a villain present on the scene, in which case they will go first.
Oh, so it's almost exactly the same. It's just to determine who goes first or not.
It's just getting rid of the roll. Basically,
Okay.
there's no roll for combat, basically, in Fabula Ultima.
Hey.
Although
You got it.
Emmanuel joined the Nice Last Call Patreon last week.
What?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Wow,
that was pretty cool.
See,
That is actually a really interesting change, because I will say that when I was running it, we ran many sessions. I mean, not a ton, but like 4 or 5. And it was true that there's one person in the group who was forced to like grit at bad armor because they were the designated initiative roller.
Right.
Everybody else had armor that gave them a massive penalty to initiative, because you just picked the person with the highest and have them roll. That's how it initially worked. So it was like Linda's character wore armor that did not give a penalty, and also had all the accessories of plus initiative and rolled initiative, and everybody else walking around with like negative whatever.
Yeah, he made a couple of tweaks to some of the items to take into account the balancing factors, but it's still kind of a work in progress. But overall, he's just like, yeah, at the end of the day, like you said, it pretty much boils down to the same thing every time. And at the end of the day, it's who goes first. It's not even as complex as a D20 based initiative where there's like, it could be 2 players and then 3 monsters. It's just like, it's always going to be alternating activations. So
right.
Anyways, yeah. Hey,
yes.
I was gonna comment to this and say, so Stephen,
Whoa.
you have been playing with the same group of role-playing game players for a long time.
Longer than most of you have been alive. Yes.
Right. So, one of, again, the premise of this channel, or the premise of this thing, is that how do you learn an RPG? So I'm curious, from your perspective, you may not have been teaching a lot of RPGs, but if you are going to learn an RPG, if someone's going to play something else that you're going to be in, what do you do? What is your procedure? Do you show up? Do you buy the book? How do you learn a new game?
Well, I play a lot of board games, a ton, and I'm always learning new board games. Those I usually just watch rules. There's a lot of how to do it and how to plays on YouTube, so those really work for me. For role-playing game is a little different because I actually prefer to do it the way we did it, which is I literally just show up and then you explain it and I kind of go with the flow, because I have been playing long enough that I can get it pretty quick. You know, I mean, I don't need to be handheld.
You can play by ear.
I can play by ear, exactly. I mean, a role-playing game, I can play by ear. No matter how good you are at any board game, you cannot play a board game by ear. You just can't, because games, they have specific rules to that game. It's impossible. Right. But role-playing games, you can very much play by ear, because they're all very similar, unless they have very specific rules on like how combat works or starship combat, or so, like very crunchy rules. They're all very kind of loosey-goosey, and the GM is there to educate and tell you what you need to do. I mean, I never played Avatar: The Last Airbender, but I'd say I won that game when we were playing.
You don't win RPGs, Stephen, but if you did, you won.
Yes.
So, but it's actually, this is sort of an advice just for anybody. I will say this is sort of a plug, an advertisement for teaching a lot of games. The more games that a player or a player group has played, the much easier it is to teach them new games, because this is true for board games too. Because what I can do is,
you're 100% right. Like,
because you can be like, all right, so this game is about medieval France, but it's got a bidding system like Ra, but it has resource, it has resource gathering, a bit like Caverna, but splashed with a little bit of Agricola. And like, people who have played those games go, oh, okay, I get it. And so the same thing is true with role-playing games. If all you've ever played is, D20, D&D, switching to Pathfinder 2 might not be the biggest shift in the world. It's pretty similar, built on the same kind of rough structure. But if you suddenly start to play a Fate game or a Powered by the Apocalypse game or a Forged in the Dark game or whatever, a 2D20 game, you might be like, wow, these are mechanics and ideas and terms and then that I've never been exposed to. But then once you're exposed to them, the next time someone teaches you a game and they're teaching it to you in the context of these other, because all these game creators are inspired and they're playing the same games you are. They're being inspired by mechanics that you are now seeing. So when you say, oh, this feels like it's a mechanic from whatever, you're probably right. It's like Candela Obscura, which I need to buy and read because I owe my channel a review of it, is obviously I'm very familiar with Blades in the Dark and Forged in the Dark games. So when I read that book, it'll be it's like I've read it before because it's based on a game that I know very, very well. So I think that, a big part of teaching a new RPG and learning a new RPG is playing a bunch of RPGs. I think different systems expand your scope and expand your capability and let you sort of connect the dots a little bit better, and make you just a more, adaptable gamer.
We have a whole episode on this that I just linked in chat. The link did not work.
Thick.
Mm-hmm.
But the episode about, I think Steven called it in the classic clickbait way, stop playing D&D to get better at playing D&D. And it was about the synergies of learning multiple tabletop RPGs in order to gain skills that you can then bring back to learn and play all of the ones that you play.
These are weird backhanded compliments.
Yes.
It's like your clickbaity way. It's not clickbaity.
It's enticing.
Enticing. That is absolutely correct.
It's successful clickbait. It works.
Well, it's not a lie, so it's not clickbait.
That's right.
And that, you know what? Okay. I got accused one time of clickbait, and I was like, how is it clickbait? My thumbnail and title both expressly say what I say in the video. And people are like, yeah, but I don't agree with your opinion, so that's clickbait. And it's like, no, that's not what clickbait means.
Trust me.
It's just marketing.
It's just marketing. In fact,
well, Veritasium did a great video on I think he calls it like type 1 and type 2 clickbait. And like type 1 clickbait is like literally bait and switch, where you say like, it's going to be this thing, and then you come in and it's just an advertisement for your Squarespace page, advertisement. But type 2 clickbait is just marketing. It's just making the thumbnail and the title, click someone. And he talked about how he was really bad at his thumbnails, which is something like I would have done. He did a video where he threw a basketball off the top of a dam.
I've seen that,
dam,
yeah,
and he spins it, and it goes out. And it's the Magnus. It's called the Magnus effect. It's what makes curveballs curve.
Thumbnail
and it was called like,
in history.
And it was called like the name of the thumbnail was like, it was like all black, and it said like strange applications of the Magnus effect. That was like the original thumbnail.
Terrible.
And so then he changed it to just a picture of him holding the ball over the dam, and I don't even know if there was any text on it at all.
And it got millions of views. Millions. Well, someone else did a video of his video, and it got millions of views, and that's what prompted him to change his, because he's like, wait, this guy's getting more views than mine, and his is a video of my video. So that I saw that too. Yeah, his is. That's actually what started me down this path of like can't find him, join him, but
right. Yeah.
I mean, it's just putting packaging on a digital project.
Yeah. I mean, they say don't judge a book by its cover, but you do that every time you go to the bookstore.
Don't judge a book by its cover, except for everything you do in your entire life.
Definitely judge books by their cover. If their cover looks like it was like a small child's crown drawing, I will be like, I don't know. And I know I shouldn't do it.
I know, but
part of me does it anyway.
Books by their cover. That's why we spend. Let me tell you, as someone who makes covers for a living, artists don't charge less for covers. They charge the most for covers because they know is the hardest one. It's like if covers weren't important, they'd be charging the same price. In fact, a cover's more expensive than a full page.
I don't know if y'all have seen bookstores. They'll wrap their books in brown packaging, and they'll say to pick a random book. But what a lot of people do is they'll put a few adjectives on that paper, so you get kind of an like, is this romance, is it action? So like it's not a total shot in the dark, but even that, it's a much less interesting cover, but you're still judging it. Sure. You're still deciding if those adjectives sound intriguing enough.
Yeah. That's like in Japan, where they actually have not pictures of the food, they actually have the food in the window. If you've ever been to Japan, where most restaurants have in the front window, all their dishes are made out of wax, and they're perfect representations of the actual dishes, so you can see exactly what you're going to get. It's like one step above the actual picture of the food is actual 3D representation of the food itself, so you know exactly what you're going to get. So there's your cover, baby. We don't have that in America. It's just like, I got to read and think and hope and pray this is what the food will be.
Or word of mouth.
All right.
So let someone else that is good.
Yes.
So let's go somewhere a little more controversial. What if you want to run a game and you want to teach a new game and a new system, but or you suspect, or you have a feeling that one of your players, or maybe your play group or whatever, is not going to enjoy the game, and they are going to be a disruptive element. And I've seen a lot of people feel like, they can't run another system because they are being kind of, I don't want to say held hostage is a bit of a, overindulgence there, but they're being held hostage by their group, who basically says like, I will only play, 5e, or whatever. And so it's not even about the mechanism of teaching them. It's about like, what do you do when you have a group who is that intractable?
That's my group. You know what happens? We play Pathfinder, baby. That's all we play.
Well, okay, so that's a simple answer that you just don't do it. But let's try to troubleshoot this from a problem-solving perspective. So, Derik, you have a group and you all want to try out a new game, except you realize that your one friend Jane does not want to try out the new game, or you pretty sure Jane won't. Even without talking to Jane, you've played with Jane for a decade. You know Jane's not going to like this game. So here's the first question. How often does Jane show up? Has Jane showed up every week for the entire decade? Every time, like clockwork? Or does Jane come some of the time and not other times? It also depends on your group in general, how they are with that. If Jane only comes 75% of the time, maybe you could run the game Jane doesn't like when she's not going to be there. And be like, oh, hey, Jane's missing this week. I know she really loves 5e and her Dragonborn character that's in there, and I don't want her to miss this next twist with dragons that we're going to do. So I was thinking we could run a little bit of the Avatar: The Last Airbender RPG while she's not here. And then if the other players like it enough that they want it more often than Jane's not there, you could offer to run it some weekends, even when you're not sure about Jane's availability, and you could sort of move into it based on that. So that's sort of my guess, unless your answer is no, Jane's there every week, then it gets trickier.
Well, and you have to hopefully have a good enough friendship with Jane where you don't present her as being the problem. Because it's not you against Jane.
Right.
Jane wants to play a fun game. Jane's your friend. And so you want to say to Jane, hey, I want you to have fun. I really want to play this game. Like, don't feel like you have to come if you don't feel like it. And so present it as you want her to be there and you want her to have fun. But if she's not going to, I'll see you next weekend.
Right. The emotional blackmail comes in is that for so many people, especially nowadays, you know, the D&D group or the RPG group is their source of socialization. It's their friend group. Maybe it's a new friend group. Maybe it's someone that you've known for 30 years, but maybe it's just a group that you found and you're really enjoying it. And you've been playing this, you know, Pathfinder campaign or this 5e campaign, and you really love being able to get an excuse to either hop online on a Zoom call or go over to somebody's house or a store or a game bar or whatever. And you get to play and you get to be out for 3 or 4 or 5 hours. And suddenly they're all talking about Avatar Legends because some asshole on YouTube named Derik started talking about it and got really hyped about it. Now you're excited about it. And you're like, I didn't even watch that stupid show. I hate anime. And then somebody's like, it's not anime. It's American animation. Derik. And so anyways, so it can leave you feeling ostracized, right? Like put on the put outs. And then, you know, I think for a lot of GMs, you end up in this role of teacher and guide and counselor anyways. And so you end up feeling like, I don't want to leave this person on the wayside. And so I feel like a lot of groups end up, you know, kind of ending up at a settling point of the lowest common denominator, right? Like, what is the game that we will all agree to play? And if there's, you know, 1 or 2 players who are basically like, I'm not going to learn a new game, I have no interest in a new game, then everybody else kind of goes, well, us playing together is more important than us playing the thing that we want to play, and then you playing the same game.
I actually have something to say on this, believe it or not. So, because I have a group, they will not play anything else. And that is that.
They didn't used to play Pathfinder 2.
They play Pathfinder 2 and Starfinder, which is basically...
but they didn't.
They will... It's Starfinder and Pathfinder, which are like basically 2 sides of the same coin in many ways. So I tried to have them play DCC. Nope. They refused. I was like, really? So, and that's it. However, we have played so much Pathfinder that I have found enjoyment of playing subsystems and... I mean, I don't know if people quite understand what I'm getting at, but like right now we're having fun playing Pathfinder, but we're also playing where they have to do some very complex, involved investigations and finding 3 MacGuffins within a prison while everyone's trying to kill them. You know, it's like, it's such a complex game that it's Pathfinder in name only. If anything, it's almost a new game, and Pathfinder's the rule set. Like, I almost come up with sub games within the game at this point. It's not just us dungeon exploring. Like, we've done things where they'll have to infiltrate a party. They'll have to rob a casino. They'll have to, in this case, literally break people out of prison while everyone's trying to kill them in an and when they're trapped in like another dimension. So we have games within the game. So I'm having fun playing my game within the game of Pathfinder. Does that make sense? So
yeah.
okay.
We have a whole relevant episode, which I also linked, and the link didn't work just now in chat, about kitchen sink RPGs that can have games within a game that are as large as some other indie RPGs are in scope.
Right.
I think Jessica Redicop's thesis on that is that basically an adventure path in a game like Pathfinder or possibly D&D, if it has a lot of its own sub-rules, is kind of like the same scope as a small indie RPG that does one genre.
Yeah, and I'm playing Adventure Path, so these guys are level 16. And on top of that, and this is another subtopic, at level 16, let me tell you, the game is not the same. It is completely different at those levels. Like, they're just so powerful, and the monsters are fighting.
It isn't. It isn't.
It isn't, but it's like the advanced version of the game, because you're really doing cool stuff at those levels. It's just
no doubt.
Yeah, but it's fun. I mean, it's like, but my point is that Pathfinder, and I think role-playing games in general, and why people can play them. I mean, think about it. I have probably played, and I'd be curious your numbers. I mean, I've probably played something like 2,000-3,000, like sessions, of role-playing games, that probably easily over 1,000 sessions just of Pathfinder alone, and never get bored of it, because at different levels, it's a completely different game. It is like 50 games in one, as opposed to, I like a lot of board games, but you can only play them so many times because there's only so many ways. That's why you buy the expansions to the board games. That's why you do more advanced rules, or you play different characters. You try different things out, because then it adds new formulas and options and, ways to play the game. But you could basically play a role-playing game, more advanced ones, forever, and they always have something new to give you. I mean, my group, these guys have been playing since the 70s. We've been playing together for 35 plus years. We're playing Agents of Edgewatch. Throughout Agents of Edgewatch, they have continuously been doing things they have never done before in role-playing games. Ever. And they've played forever. And they're like, yeah, I've never done this before, ever, in a game. Which is really saying something, if you think about it. It's like a baseball game. You know how you can see a baseball game and there's always something new? Same thing. It's like you can play a role-playing game. There's always something new.
That's a great point. I don't know.
Derik just semi disagrees.
Well, it's more just that, like, I think that there are, like, I'll use an example. An ex-girlfriend of mine.
Oh my God! How many of these stories do you have? Yes,
a lot. I have a lot. A lot of ex-girlfriends, Stephen.
I know, obviously.
So she wanted friends. Okay, that liked the same things that she liked, that liked the same movies that she liked, that liked the same foods that she liked, that liked going to the same bars or clubs or whatever that she liked. She wanted a friend. She wanted like an all seasons friend, right? That basically it's like, I can hang out with this friend and I can do anything that I want to do because I know that they are going to be compatible. Then there are people, me, where I'm like, this is my racquetball buddy. This is my go to Vegas buddy. This is my, so it's like I put people into these like pockets, these niches.
What pocket am I?
You're the RPG pocket.
Oh, okay.
slash YouTube pocket. But like,
wow.
Which is, I mean, it's not like it's a hard and fast rule. I'm simply saying that for me, I don't mind having that compartmentalization. So to your point about, your point about Jessica's point, Redicops, where she talked about, and this is very true. You're sitting there playing Rise of the Rune Lords, and boom, suddenly you hit the second adventure, and you're like, oh, this is like a murder mystery. It's a whodunit. It's kind of scary, creepy with this weird haunted house, and it's like this kind of mini vignette piece within the broader context of the story, which is fine. But I'm kind of more in the line of like, I'd rather have the game system that does the one thing and does that only, than have the system that sort of like applies to everything. And then I try to like,
that was our whole episode, was those boutique systems that do one thing versus systems that kitchen sink it. Yeah. And we tried to create a scale because most people don't measure that don't measure that as a scale. It's not one of the dimensions people talk about. And we had a whole discussion with Lauren and Jessica. It's at the link there.
I caught like only the first couple minutes of that, and I remember being like, "Damn it, this is like the one." I just haven't had time to go back and watch it, but now I need to go watch it because I'm curious about a scale. I'd love to know what anchored the ends of the extremes.
They had numbers. I saw it. I was watching it. They were like
because I'm tickled pink by the idea of anyone trying to create a mathematical scale and Mark is involved in the conversation, because you know that he's going to be like challenging their assumptions.
So Lady Blackbird is on the end of very boutique, because the only thing that you can play, boutique. The only thing you can play with Lady Blackbird is this one adventure about Lady Blackbird. And
there is a paragraph at the end where it's like you could continue the adventure, but
it's continuing that one adventure about Lady Blackbird. And so I think GURPS is something that's literally trying to do everything on the other extreme.
It literally is everything.
Yeah.
Did you ever play GURPS? It's one of these things. I never played it. I read it.
I did. GURPS was my second
RPG.
Any
good? It's like I can't tell.
I didn't like it, but GURPS was my second RPG. Right. I bought it. I want to say it was like the third edition.
There was a GURPS book for everything.
Yeah, I just bought the basic black cover Steve Jackson games. It was my second. Because I was like, I want to be a mature and I want to be because everybody at that time was starting to go into like the World of Darkness stuff, and I knew I didn't like that. Like I wasn't into like the Ghoulies and the Ghasties and the
Vampire Masquerade's awesome.
Yeah, I was not a big fan of that. So I was like, okay, I need to level up my game. And so then I went to GURPS, but then I bounced off of GURPS. But then I ended up finding like Earth Dawn and some other good games, which I much more enjoy. Anyways. I mean, the other thing is like some people I think don't need to play new games or learn new games. If you're happy with your game, I don't know why,
Well, that's a whole other subgenre because
are you happy, Steven?
Oh, yeah, I'm happy, but these guys, they barely remember the rules for the game they're playing, because Laura is trying to teach them a new one. They barely know this one. And they've been playing it every week for 5 years, and they barely know it. I was like, oh, guys, learn your characters. Every week, it's the same week. Every week, we're like, what were we doing? How do I play my character? I'm like, every week. How do you people function in life? But the joke is they know how to play their characters. I think they do it just to razz on me.
That's possible.
Probably. It works. That's also why we have to do a VTT, because I'm like, just press the button. It'll do everything for you.
I don't want to open up that can of worms.
That's a whole other can of worms. I don't even know if I can play without a VTT anymore.
As a random aside, one of our members of our team bought Dragonbane, which is just came out it's the new version of Dragonbane, the Americanized version or English version. And he picked up the box set and he ran it for us. He really liked it. And he was like, "Hey, I want to run these for some of our patrons." So I was like, "Okay." So we're like getting on Foundry. He's like, "Hey, it's free, but there's like a premium version that's like $30 or something for a premium Foundry module." And I was like, "Yeah, we'll buy it and we'll set it up." And I got to be honest with you, companies listen, and I know Paizo did this with like Abomination Vaults, which I had a chance to look at. If you offer these premium versions of these Foundry modules, I think, and they're this good, I think people will buy them. I think it is well worth your money.
I made it premium. I'm actually kind of curious because I think our modules are pretty freaking premium, to say the least. Yeah. I think ours is like top.
But I mean, like the level of smoothness and integration. Yeah, you have to pay $25. It's not free, from the marketplace. But It's really, really good.
Huh.
And so
I'll take a look.
Yeah, it's.
Do they got animated tokens like we do?
They do not. But it was still really, really impressive, and it was just like again, Pathfinder 2 is really impressive, and it's free, but it's also got a almost stupidly devoted group of developers who program and code for it. You know what I mean? Like, Paizo lucked out huge
they have no idea like how much they lucked out. They have no idea.
They lucked out. I mean, between the Foundry team and the Nethys team, they the two main ways that people are engaging with their game system these days are both being provided free of charge by people who are doing it pro bono. as a volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
That's real lucky.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When you're seeing that a little bit now, like I don't want to say the cracks, but like right, Nethys still isn't updated with core. You know,
A lot of work.
It's been a lot. It's a lot of work, and especially when they're like, "Yeah, this isn't our full-time job." Like, what do you know, like?
Well, we have the same developers. Our developers for our Founder modules are the same ones who did the remaster. And let me tell you, boy, they were busy because they were like working on remaster while they're working on our stuff at the same time, and we had to sneak it in, work around those schedules. So yeah, it's quite crazy. So after all this, Hannah, what did you think? What do you think of all this madness? What's your game du jour right now? Because you're all into D&D and Fae and fairies. So what do you play, and what are you playing with? What's your group?
So we were talking earlier about imposter syndrome. I have only played D&D and only played D&D 5e for 3, almost 4 years now. I'm extremely new to the RPG world, and I have people in my videos. One person commented an idea, and they said, "But I don't know. I mean, you've played so much longer than I have." I'm like, "You don't know that. I don't know anything. I don't know any of these games y'all were just talking about. I don't know any other system. I wouldn't even know where to begin with Pathfinder. Good to know there's a starter box. That's the first I'm hearing of it." And so my world is, I don't even know that much about D&D. I don't know what Baldur's Gate 3 is about. Basically,
That's a good thing.
No, it's not. Baldur's Gate 3 is
Okay.
fantastic.
And so I'm sitting here, and what I do is I love having a game that's fantasy based. Like I haven't sold my soul to D&D. I'm open to trying other stuff, but I saw this game and I said, "Oh, well, I can bring in what I know and what I'm passionate about, which is a lot of medievalism and a lot of fantasy." I mean, my master's is in English. I focus on medievalism fiction. And being able to bring that into the game world is what I've really enjoyed and really focused on. And so I have spent much less time learning RPGs and learning D&D lore, and more time trying to make the game out of something that I love in my personal life.
Yeah. It's funny. The first thing I thought of when you came on, and it was like the Fey Wild Fiend or whatever like that. So there's a game called Monster Hearts. I'm not going to get into the detail of it, but basically the premise is it's a story game about the messy lives of teenage monsters. And so like, it's basically like Twilight, but like with a little bit more edge to it. So each character class is like a typical, and you're a teenage monster in high school. So there's like the vampire, there's the werewolf, there's the normal person. But one of my favorite playbook in the game is the Fae. Which, and it's like when you said you were from the Fae, I was like, she would probably be really good at playing the Fae. Because like each monster has sort of a unique take on it. And, you know, in the Fae's thing is about extracting promises from people and twisting their words and, you know, getting more than you gave, and like, you know, fairy justice if you break and if you go back on the binding of the words and all sorts of stuff. And so it plays out very differently than like a werewolf or vampire. But it'd be funny to see someone with your background expertise tackle that, because I think you do a really good job. But it's my favorite because
Mark wrote an entire race on the She, which are
the She are very much about all the things you just said, Derik. Twisting words and extracting promises and holding you to your word. All sorts of stuff.
But that's
Avery Alder agrees.
Yeah, but the thing is, everyone has to start. Actually, that's why I wanted you on the stream, Hannah, because everyone has to start somewhere. And as long as you're passionate, who cares? I mean, we're talking about old man stuff that no one plays anymore. We're just old men like reminiscing about the good old days of GURPS, which is this crappy...
Honestly, I think chat will agree when I say this, but I feel like, yes, sometimes we talked about games that like you didn't know about the game, so you didn't have something to say at that point. But all the times you chimed in were solid gold advice every time.
Yeah.
Like
but
pretty
that's...
much. So by density, everything that you had to say was the best by far out of the four of us. I think chat would probably agree with that.
Derik has a love affair with old crap that no one plays, and he even has a love affair with new crap that no one plays. But
right, as long as no one's playing it, that's the key.
As long as no one's playing it. It's on his channel, and he'll talk about it at length.
So you're a professional hipster.
You know what?
Oh!
So I've been accused. So here's the thing. I've definitely been accused of that before, about liking stuff just because it's cool and popular. But the truth is, like, I have no problem with D&D. It's just D&D 5th edition wasn't my favorite edition of the game. And for the past 3 or 4 years, I've predominantly played Pathfinder 2, which is arguably the second most popular game. So I find that, but I have been accused of that before for just not liking stuff. And also, you know, we just played MCDM RPG, which is apparently going to destroy all comers and be a vast wave of never-ending destruction in its quest for domination.
I do not think so. See, this is the thing. The one that's going to be the never-ending destruction and quest for domination is already out. It's called Shadow Dark. that thing has legs. Oh my god, people are just loving that. I went to a gaming convention. This was only 1,000 people in that gaming convention, and there was more people playing Shadow Dark there than probably everything else combined. I was like kind of stunned how many people were playing Shadow Dark. So
I know
Kelsey made that, right?
yes,
Yeah, Kelsey made Shadow Dark.
Yes.
So I get crap because remember I said, like, last time I was on, you're like you had your Shadow Dark, and I was like, oh, I don't have Shadow Dark, and I was like, oh wait, no, I do have Shadow Dark, and then I held up my copy of BX D&D, and I was like, but I'll just add real time torches to it. Here's the thing about Shadow Dark, as I understand it, right? It's I don't want to say baby's first OSR, but like it's a very you know, dipping your toe in, wading into the shallow end kind of concept of the OSR style movement with a lot of similar 5e touchstones that help people move into there. And it's interesting to me, and that makes total sense why it's successful. What that's not what surprises me. What surprises me is that there is this large enough groundswelling of 5e players who are apparently moving away from the sort of modern soap opera storytelling-esque structure of your, you know, Critical Role style campaigns / BG3, right? These really overly elaborate, and they're moving towards this more old school style of play. And I wonder if that's like reactionary to everything else that's been going on, or is it just part of a sort of a seasonal shift in the wants and desires of everything. Everything is
a pendulum. I mean, everything in teaching styles and fashion and culture and all of it. You're just swinging back and forth. That's all you're doing.
I just never thought that like that there would be that much like MCDM doing as well as it did makes total sense for me, because there's so many people who I see play D&D, and even with all the story, I'm like, look, I just want to be cool in combat and be like an Avengers movie, and I want to do my cool thing and, you know, kick ass and take names, right? But that's MCDM taking that to like the next level, right? Yeah. But like going the other way of being like, I want to be worried about whether I'm going to starve to death, or if a rat is going to get the last of my rations, and if my torch is going to run out, I'm going to die alone in the dark, holding myself while the bugs surround. Like that to me seems very, don't get me wrong, I like that style of play sometimes, but it seems very odd to me that there's this such support for that style of play.
There's video games about survival like that are super popular. That have titles like "Don't Starve." That's about not starving.
I do not know video games, so that's a good observation, Mark.
I was going to bring that very thing up. Is that I say it all the time on my channel that video games are a couple years ahead of role playing games, and in the last couple of years, that there was there's Dark Souls, which is, you know, like this super duper.
That's a different story. That's more about the combat being difficult. You could even have an MCDM style game if the combat was harder, that you could say was similar to Dark Souls.
Yeah, but it's not different, because Dark Souls was so brutal to the point of unfair. And yes, I know you're a god at it, but the point is that game it is for most people, and people loved it. And then you also have the other games like the Don't Starve and the survivalist games that have gotten extremely popular, which are the exact opposite of, because, again, I think it's circular, because when I was a kid, when video games were designed to eat as many quarters as possible and were insanely brutally hard, because they were designed that way. They were designed so you play for 3 minutes and then you would die and then you put in another quarter. So they're purposely made to be impossibly, ridiculously hard. But then with computer games came around, they were made to be, I wouldn't call it easier, but they were more forgiving in many ways. And now it's gone back to, okay, let's make video games so freaking hard. And, same thing. I think people played a lot of 5e. And I haven't played a million things of 5e, but let me tell you, whenever I play 5e and we go into combat, it's always the same. It's like, oh, okay, who gets to go and kill the bad guy? It's not a question if they're going to win. It's just a question of who gets to win. As opposed to still to this day, when we play Pathfinder, that they have to sit there for 30 minutes or 20 minutes talking it out whether or not they should run away because they might be TPK'd, and like that's what makes Pathfinder so fun is that it's freaking hard if you're playing it right.
Just cast heroism on the Magus and have the fighter aid the Magus and have the Magus cast True Strike.
Yeah, but
guarantee a critical hit.
Yeah,
archetype.
You guys,
psychic,
okay, you got
imaginary weapon.
We don't do any of that. My guys all took flaws on purpose just to make they play in hard mode, and they didn't even take free archetype. They don't want any of that. They purposely are making their characters weaker so that it's as hard as possible. And then
that also says that. I'm sorry.
No, that was it. I'm just saying our guys are nuts, so.
That also says a lot about your players, though, because there is the group of people who love a hard game. They want to be challenged. They want to fight for it. But there's also been this huge surge of people who love cozy games. They don't want to be stressed. They want to relax. They want to go gather. They want there to be a storyline that they have to complete, but they don't have to complete it in 30 seconds. And they just want to chill and walk their way through it. And like, with more and more games in the video game world, in the RPG space, all that's doing is just opening up more options depending on your playstyle. We talked earlier about mechanics versus story-based. But what do you want? Do you want hard or easy? Do you want to relax and be chill the whole time? Or do you want to be a little stressed out and try to overcome?
Yeah. I mean, cozy games.
Absolutely.
That is
and
actually
there's room for every style of game.
Oh, there certainly is. Yeah.
When you talk about a pendulum or a cycle, we're not trying to say, oh, now all of games have become like that. Right. At this point, games have just become so big that everything is available and everything is popular, even with the same people in different mindsets, right? Like, I often go for games that are on a really hard difficulty mode, whereas like Linda will go to a cozy game if that's what she's in the mood for, or a really challenging game, and then be like, oh, that's too much of that one. Now I'll go into this other game, and it's just depending on like where she's at, right? And the ecosystem of having every different kind of game, I think, is great because it allows not only people to get games that work for them, but individual people who want different games at different times, depending on their emotional landscape and what day you had that day, can have the right game for you.
And you also get to discover stuff you like. I'm an Animal Crossing person myself. I mean, I'm trying to relax. And so D&D combat scared me the first time because this is so stressful. People are trying to kill me. Why are they doing that? But what I've learned is how fun it can be to be bloodthirsty and to see the strategy and to like it unlocks this new part of yourself you didn't even know was there, and how fun a new type of game could be.
Wow, boy, you got to play Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Hannah. You think you're gonna like it a lot?
Actually, someone in chat, which I that's another great recommendation about Ars Magica, because they were like, with Hannah being a medievalist, like Ars Magica takes place in a basically medieval Europe if wizards were real, and kind of like Harry Potter-esque in the sense that they're like secret and they're hidden. But yeah, it's we just did a look at it a couple weeks ago on my channel.
You did. Yeah, again. What's the next thing you're looking at? I
have to look at Candela Obscura because we had a tip goal and people wanted to know how I felt about it.
I'm very curious to hear what you.
Well, because they're like, it got a lot of bad press, and like people like Indestructible Boy came out and kind of tanked on it, and like a lot of people are like, are people just tanking on it because it's cool to shit on Critical Role, and try to ride that hype train or whatever? And there's a lot of critiques about the game, but they're from people who are clearly not familiar with Blades in the Dark / Forge in the Dark style games, and a lot of people are like, Derik, you really know those games really, really well, so it'd be interesting to get your take on it. So I think
Indestructible Boy and Justin Alexander, who both had some points about it, they said some positives and some negatives, and I don't feel I definitely don't feel like Indestructible Boy was trying to be like,
No.
oh, it'll be cool to take on a popular thing. If anything, he looked kind of scared at the beginning of the review.
He did.
Yes, he
Of
did.
being like attacked
And rightfully
by the
so.
fandom because of the fact that what he said was not full-throatedly positive.
Well, you know what? Yeah. I've heard a lot. I haven't read the rules. I'd be very curious in your take, Derik. Very much
I am
so.
sure I will like it because I like those style of games, and I'm sure there will be a couple of things that I think the one main thing, again, we're getting off the topic here. I think the one main thing about it, which again, here's full disclosure,
You can teach us how to play it.
I am not a horror guy. Okay. So like Call of Cthulhu, like I just picked up my first Call of Cthulhu books this past year at Gen Con. And because I felt like, you know, as a student of the hobby, I deserved, you know, it deserved my attention. But I'm not a big fan of horror. And I guess to a certain degree, because I do love certain games like Dread. And I agree that part of the point of horror is pushing people past a certain point of comfort. That's what horror is. And that's why people who enjoy it, it's that catharsis that comes from sort of being kind of rid of those emotions. And I guess, you know, Candela Obscura is sort of situated in a sort of Vaesen / Call of Cthulhu-esque world. But then there's a lot of stuff in there about like, you know, permissions and lines and veils and like horror content, and you shouldn't disturb your players. And I think a lot of people took off umbrage at the fact that the game is supposed to be a horror game, but it's like you can't have a horror game if it's like, but this can't upset anybody and this has to be on everybody's page. And I don't necessarily know that
that was a big issue with it, is that it's supposed to be horror and yet it was very protective. It's like kind of having your cake and eat it too. And yeah, that I think that's an interesting. I don't know. We do that in ours because I wanted to do really horrific things in our adventure path, and Mark made me put in the content warnings. But I do think, you know, it's the right thing to do, because that way you can have your cake and eat it too, because that's why you can be horrible in the game and you have a content
you don't
warning.
have to not do it, but you want to put in a content warning so that people know that it's there, so that they can prepare for it and give some advice about how to handle it. I feel like, to me, if we're talking about what is the Candela Obscura biggest controversy, it was that I believe in the quick start guide, and they removed this from the final version of the book, that it had a section that basically claimed that it would be like unconscionable and not mechanically viable, or something that was that strongly worded. It was maybe not exactly that word, but to have any depiction of like a mental illness or disability in the game's rule set. But then they also had tons of physical disabilities and multiple things that were actually mental illnesses. They just didn't use the psychiatric term for them, but they were like,
and
you hear
Indestructible Boy had
like
very big issues with that.
So that is where the controversy came, is that not that they didn't use it enough or did use it or whatever, but that they said very strongly in the initial quick start guide they would seem to be like punching at any other game that did do something like that, while also kind of including it anyway. So that's what the have your cake and eat it too, I think, was referring to. That being said, you should look at a full review from someone who was going page by page and showing the actual text, rather than my TLDR summary.
And to be clear, on my channel, I usually do first looks, where I literally open up a PDF for the first time of a game I have not read, and I sort of give my initial reaction to it. It's more of a reaction than a review.
When you do,
and then
ours?
I also do,
and
then I do reviews, which is, you know, books that I've read cover to cover, I've used, I've played, but I will not call something a review unless I've actually like used it and played it, or I know the system really, really particularly well. Otherwise, I'll just call it like an impression. So it won't be a review of Candela Obscura. It would be more of an impression.
Eric, you've had dragons for years. Where's my dragon review?
Well, do you really need a dragon review at this point?
Yes.
You need a Year of Legends review.
Sure. Year of Legends.
Aaron,
Eldamod's coming out pretty soon.
Aaron was just talking. We were talking. I think he just got Year of Legends. Is that right?
Well, he would
have just got Devils like the other day.
Well, no, he got Battles Your Best for Strange and Unusual.
Yeah, he got Strange and Unusual, and he was like, dude, they crushed it again. You know, because he doesn't keep up with it as much as like I do and stuff like that. But he was just flipping through the book, and he was just like, yeah, he's like, this is such a great book. So he was loving it.
Yeah, that one's actually even better, I think, than the first one. Because there's more monsters and they're actually different
More
quality.
strange and
They're, well,
unusual.
yeah. I have a soft spot for weird things, so I kind of like the weird monsters on top of that. So
I know you do. See, I am.
That's why I'm friendly with you, because I like weird things.
I am a basic bitch Dungeons and Dragons player. I like the pumpkin spice latte of D&D
You
monsters.
say that, and yet you end up playing nothing but leshies.
No,
and...
I do not play leshies.
Yes, you do.
Only when people force him to because they hate him.
Yeah,
Yes.
but you love it. You
No.
love it.
I do not.
Hannah, so he tries to be really tough, but reality, well, he's hardcore, hard school, but really, he's got a soft spot for leshies
So actually,
and fairies.
Hold on, I'm going to take the
I-
middle path for you, Derik. I'll equivocate for you.
Okay.
I believe that Derik truly does not like those things. He really is a elves and humans and dwarves traditionalist, and that there maybe is a little bit of kayfabe with him, like protesting a lot towards the fans
Don't
so that he can
protest
build
too
up
much.
his donations that he receives to do the things that he doesn't like, but that he actually really would, if he was playing in his home group, would not be playing those. He just wouldn't also be complaining about them so performatively either.
So
Well,
I have
such a thing as preference too.
right, but I have a confession because we do have the Feywild Fiend here. I, on my channel, especially as we've played a lot of Pathfinder 2, Pathfinder, the powers that be, the authors of the various adventures, and the game system as a whole seems to have a inordinate amount of love for the Fey creature type, and they will throw Fey creatures in a lot. And this is hallmarked by the Leshy, which in some ways kind of
It's not even a fae, though, Derik.
right. I
It's
know
a plant.
it's a plant, but it's close enough, Mark. It's close enough.
They're all the same
And-
to you.
They're all the same to me. The thing is, what I don't like, I basically talk about how I don't like Fae. But the truth of the matter is, I do like Fae. I like Fae when they are strange and alien
And unusual.
and unusual. And I like Fae when they are sort of more of your historical storybook Fae, mischievous and having a different scale of morals that almost a Cthulian kind of way where they have such a different set of beliefs and structures that they seem alien and weird. I don't like how they get a lot of times just kind of cutified. And it's just like, oh, this is my cute little Fae creature. This is my cute little Leshy, which is not a Fae, but whatever. It's still a primal spirit given. Like the idea of like primal spirits awakening in bunches of dead leaves and tree branches and small plants because nature itself is sort of beginning to grow and protest against the encroaching dominion of civilization. And these creatures, like, that's awesome. But when they're like, when it's a cute cactus person wearing a top hat strolling along Absalom drinking tea with a monocle in its eye, I go, what are we even doing here? Like, it's just, I don't like how Fae just get used in this very, in my opinion, un-Fae-like way.
It makes me think of the changeling in D&D and how surprised I was to discover that the changeling exists. Because, I mean, in Fae history, in medieval literature,
Terrifying,
the changeling replaces a baby.
Yeah.
It swaps out a human baby with a new one. And honestly, I can't be too upset that D&D doesn't stick too closely to that lore because the
disturbing.
history behind it is really sad. Well, a lot of it came about because there were people who had neurodivergent babies, who were autistic, who had physical disabilities, who didn't act like normal babies. And their only way to rationalize that was, well, this isn't my baby. This is an evil baby that was replaced. And so a lot of horrific things came of it. So again, I can't be too upset about D&D not sticking too closely to that lore. But at the same time, a changeling as a player, I'm like, okay, so you can use these abilities with whatever motivations you want, with whatever, and I often want to know, like, how are you Fae? What is a little odd about you? What's a little weird? What's a little quirky? What motivation do you have besides, oh, I naturally can change my appearance, so I'm going to sneak around, which is fine. But is there something about you that speaks to the realm that you're supposed to be from?
Yeah.
I always thought that Eberron should have named shifters for the doppelganger kin that are called changelings because they shapeshift. And Pathfinder 2e does have changelings, that hags have replaced your baby with a changeling. Obviously, Changeling the Dreaming, the World of Darkness game is the all fae game that's all about people who like turn out to be fae. So there are a lot of good games out there with those style of changelings, but you're absolutely right that when you're talking about fae, there are different ways to do it. And Derik, I would say leshies are not a great example of it because they literally are creature type plant and not fae. But
yeah, I know.
I do see what you're saying of being them more approachable. You might like Battlezoo Ancestry She, where it talks about their strange morality and how, because of the fact that in that particular ancestry, they adhere to storybooks and legends and narrative arcs. So it's like, don't be misled by the fact that they're a knight in shining armor and that they seem like they're about honor and you think means that they're the good guys. Being a hero for them means something very different. And for example, for them, it would be a horrific act if they were going through and they defeated the enemy army and they found like the child of the enemy leader and they let them live. Because the story, if like the knight does that, the story is that that kid grows up and kills the lord who ordered that attack. So you're being incredibly disloyal to allow them to live. You have to cut off narrative arcs and make sure that they don't come back to bite you with the last surviving person coming and defeating you. And so, like, fae just have this completely alien mindset where a human would be like, that's horrific. How can you possibly call yourself the hero or a good guy if you're going after this non-combatant? And they're like, you have a short-sighted view of things, mortal.
Right. Exactly. That strange alien physiology, and psychology. I think that's what's interesting about fae. And it's like what Hannah was saying. It's like, no, I don't think what's interesting about you is that you can change your shape. I think it's more interesting is like, what does that allow you to do in the pursuit of your strange and unusual motivations and goals and manipulations? And and that's where I think it gets more interesting. And I feel like so many people just take a hard right turn on that. And I'm like, okay, cool. So you are just, it's just window dressing, it's you wanted for the cool racial power and, maybe some sick stat bonuses. Well, and it's like, that's
a whole other, I think that's a whole other topic. I know what you're getting at, but I would recommend you check out, because if you check out Angels and Devils and even Evil Eye, or Year of Legends, because there's a whole section about how angels and devils view the world very differently than everyone. And then it goes into that, like, they see the world in a very different way. And if you're going to play one of those creatures, that you will not see the world like a human would, especially if you're an angel, because it's like angels have very strange goals and have
evil eyes see it through one giant eye.
Yeah, and the angels I thought was the most interesting, because not only do they fallen or have come to Earth, but they spend a lot of time even just trying to figure out how to get back. Not all, but some trying to get back into God's good graces and becoming true angels again. But they just see the world really differently because they've lived so long. And that's what I also like too, these stories of creatures that live forever or like thousands of years, and then to everything like we're just ants. It's like your petty quabbles mean nothing to me. It's like what you consider a big deal is like nothing in comparison to my life, which is thousands and eons of years. So I get what you're getting at, but you know what? End of the day, people just like to dress up and say things in silly voices and be goofy.
Sometimes you just want to be a little guy.
Yeah.
Not me, but yes, I get that.
You want to be a little cactus guy with little
Derik
hats.
is just going to shake his fist at Linda for designing the Leshy ancestry.
I don't even like to be elves because I'm like.
But you love to be gnomes, right? Is that your favorite?
No, gnomes are not my favorite. But I'm like, how am I supposed to portray this character who is already 3 times as old as I will ever be, and is potentially going to live for hundreds or thousands or potentially
Derik
infinite years?
Melinda, true role player. I play humans humans and only humans, because that's the only thing I have a reference
Derik,
to.
do you sometimes play dwarves so that you can be like the grumpy dwarf character?
But
I do
you're
play some
a
dwarves,
very young
but
dwarf. You're only.
I have a
you're...
lot of humans, a very
Ooh.
small number of halflings.
Oh my god! I was
a
joking, but I
hand-
guess it's true.
A handful of half elves. I can kind of get their shtick, right, because they're definitely mortal, but they've got this weird, torn between two worlds type of situation. But yeah, no. Other than that, I don't partake.
So
Don't
he's
partake.
so all these ancestries, all these cool races, species, all this wasted on Derik.
Wasted on me. It really is. It is. It really is. In fact, I absolutely adore / play tons of games that I play. Like we played Quest for the Frozen Flame. I was like, all right, you all are from the realm of Mammoth Lords. Okay, you are members of the Kelid people. You're all humans. Like those are the Kelid. Like, as I know, the Gatherings can have other people from other ancestries, but not here. And then, like, for me, when I play a game that's like, oh, there's no elves or dwarves or whatever in this game, it's just humans. I'm like, that is okay with me. I know how to play a human.
Poor Derik, missing out on the best parts.
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah.
You are.
Well, the other thing is, whatever. I'm not going to get into it, but
It's Derik's preferences. We started at the beginning of this episode, and we tying it back in here. You need to figure out what a person's preferences are when you're deciding how to teach them an RPG.
But then, why do you
I
play?
think that Hannah made a good point that you can convince people with your excitement by showing what you're interested in. Catch more flies with honey. Like, don't tell them your RPG is bad and here's why this one is better. Instead, show them what cool things they can do in the new RPG. For many people, that actually is the new ancestries. And for me, like, yeah, instead of don't tell your players who you want to move from 5e to Pathfinder 2e, oh, Pathfinder 5e. 5e is bad and Pathfinder fixes it in this way. Instead, be like, hey, in Pathfinder, you can play this Cactus Leshy who's a psychic or something like that. And then they might get interested. But Derik, if you knew your player was Derik, you would not use that technique to convince Derik.
And I have players who I would absolutely use that technique on. I have one who we have one player in the group, and he's so great because every character he plays, but after his first game, his first experience, every single spell, he changed the type of damage and flavored it specifically to his character. And so he's always looking for something new and creative and weird. And it's just so fun to present people like that with new things.
Yet Derik only plays games like Root and Oath with me, where he's playing nothing, no humans. He's playing bird people. He's playing beavers.
Yeah, we did Root, and we had a raccoon person. We had
a raccoon.
Well, no, I'm talking about our role playing game.
Oh, your role playing game,
that we did on our channel. We had a raccoon person, a hedgehog person, a fox person, and a badger person. But again, it's a fairy tale world. Well, no. It's fairy tale world if it was Game of Thrones / like rated R type stuff. So it was pretty brutal. Had like extortion and murder and the destruction of life and limb.
Root's a brutal game.
Redwall series.
It's like Redwall.
It is like
but
Redwall.
Like Redwall X Game of Thrones. Like it's pretty
similar.
brutal.
It's similar.
Anyways, it's very good. Anyways,
well, we've gone way too long. So
I know.
Well, the problem
you can tell because I'm playing my own version of Shadow Dark.
Oh, look at that! It's like we've got to play so long. We're playing a game on here.
Look, but you can see I am in the
Derik
dark
only plays
now.
adventures about humans in a YouTube podcast. There you go.
Sounds like a fun game.
That actually would be Derik's game. If Derik wrote a role-playing game, Derik says, okay, we could do a fun little game. What would be the name of your game if you wrote a role-playing game? Mark, Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Look at that. He won.
Oh.
No.
It's easy. The DM RPG.
The DM RPG.
DM because he's Derik Melinda.
The Derik Melinda.
Why don't we call it the DM RPG? Here's what it is. In this RPG, everyone is playing the role of either Derik Melinda or someone else in his circle who is trying to DM people through RPGs that nobody else has played. You use various statistics to do this. And your goal in this RPG is in the RPG, your character is running people through games. and you score points based on how well you were in the game, how few other people have ever heard of or played that game. And you can get penalties where if you run it too well, because you're also a streamer in this DM RPG, that it gets popular. And then your score retroactively goes down because people now are paying attention to it more. And so you have to balance certain factors to become the ultimate Derik Melinda.
Well, if we were playing the
RPG.
If we're playing the DM RPG, Hannah won because Hannah never heard of any of these games that Derik was talking about.
That's true. That is true.
I know nothing.
And that's the way Derik likes it. He likes to be
blessed are the meek, but they shall inherit theirs. No, I mean, like, honestly though, it can become a problem. You know, this whole thing has been about teaching and learning RPGs. I will say that as someone who, I think I bought 4 new RPGs last week. So,
oh my God! I thought you were going to say last year. You're like last week.
Last week.
Oh
you know, I probably buy about an average of 5 to 6 RPGs a month. So systems, not books, like new system. You read it, you go, wow, this is great. Oh, this is great too. All right, I'll pass on this one. But that one's great, and you're like, okay, great. Since the last time my group and I have gotten together, I have found 3 new systems that I want to play. Never mind the 35 of them that I have in the queue and the hopper. And so it can leave you in a feeling of almost analysis paralysis, where having so many options can, you know, it's like,
you don't want to see my full collection.
It's like
wait,
the bell
look at
jar.
Hannah's full collection. That's it. Wow, I'm impressed. My collection
Shouldn't be.
No, I think it's impressive because, again, like, that is your collection, and you make like a bunch of quality content. You have tons of insights in this video, and so like it shows that you can do more with less.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll take that. I'll take that.
Strange compliment, but okay.
I think I might have more 5e books than you. So
I unfortunately have every 5e book ever made.
I don't have every single
Why
one.
is it unfortunate that you have every 5e book, Steven?
Because I'll never get to
see
play
himself
them.
as a 5e publisher, even though he's totally a 5e publisher.
Who's the hipster
I
here
actually
now,
like
Steven?
this, though. I'm the hipster. Well, because I love it. Look, it's Mort. He's like my favorite character. Look, he's good. He's so funny. I love Mort. And this
Mort
is-
definitely has a lot of Steven Glicker energy.
Oh my God, he's got little sidebars. He's got him talking and telling. Oh my God, this is such a good book.
I will say, when they introduced the
this book.
Feywild in 4th edition D&D, because it didn't really exist before that, like there was kind
It
of
was known as like the plane of fairy, and it was very rarely used.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But like I loved what they did in the 4th edition cosmology, which I think they threw away in 5th edition, unfortunately. I don't know. I wonder where they were, but the idea of the 4th edition cosmology is you have like the material plane, the real world, and then there's sort of the bright reflection of the world, and then there's sort of the shadowed reflection of the world.
Like
the shadowed
Stranger
reflection
Things?
Well, yeah, I mean, in some ways, but like the shadow dark, the shadow gloom. I'm trying to remember what it's called, but might have been called the shadow dark. I think it was called the shadow dark. The shadow dark was like a parallel plane that was basically like a mirror plane of the material world, but it was
Shadowfell.
Thank you, Jimmy. Was like this, dark world, shadowed world. But then the Feywild was the bright world, but that didn't mean good. It meant everything turned to 11, right? Everything that was, everything was more intense. Everything was more crazy. Everything was more over the top. And so like, it was just as dangerous. And I really liked how they did the Feywild in 4th edition D&D. And I don't know how they do it.
You love everything about
They
4th
don't do
edition.
much.
Everything's 4th edition with you.
A lot of what
why
I
don't you
pull from
just-
my videos is from previous editions.
Why don't you just marry 4th edition, Derik? You love it
Interesting.
So much.
Well, I would, but it's under the GSL. And so I can't.
Yeah, it's true.
I think that's the
GSL
best way
stops
to end
you.
this.
Not OGL.
So where can people find you, Derik Melinda?
Nowhere.
Nowhere. That's right. Okay, we're done with you. Hannah, where can people find you and your upcoming YouTube channel that everyone should check out?
Well, you can find me on YouTube at Feywild Fiends if you just want to get real deep into Feywild world. Although I'm going off it, I watched a lot of John Wick this week, so tomorrow's video will be about that in D&D, but mostly Feywild.
John
wow.
Wick, the game designer, not John Wick, the movie.
John, I watched all 4 movies in 2 days.
Oh,
And it's the only thing I can think about right now.
Really?
so-
Have you never
that
seen? Oh, that's interesting. What
that
have
is
you-
so funny. I'm sorry, that's so funny to me because you
There's
said it.
John
And I was
Wick,
making
the
I was
game
making a
designer.
joke because John Wick is like a legendary game designer
Yeah.
who's created like a ton of role playing games,
Yeah.
and so I assumed that's who you were
No,
talking
no,
about.
because you're
No,
you-
she was obviously talking about the movies.
obviously talking about. What was your favorite of the 4?
I mean, I really liked the first one. The rest, they were good. Like, I was surprised at how well the quality maintained itself throughout the movies. But there was something, I liked the simplicity of the first one.
First one's good. Second one's
I've
my
only
favorite.
seen the first. Yeah,
First
I've only
one's-
seen the first one.
First one's
but-
good. Second one's my favorite. Third is garbage, and fourth is a video game. That is my opinion.
I won't get on that. I was talking to my husband about it because I was watching it with him for the 4th movie. I'm like, this is a video game.
No, it's totally
There's
video game.
cutscenes and then
There's
combat
cutscenes, and there's the
and
whole
there's
thing when they're
levels,
above.
and it
when-
gets harder.
Yeah, it
and-
gets harder and harder, and then there's a final boss, and he has to go up the stairs, and it comes back down, and then there's even the scene where they're overhead, and that's from so many video games. I was like, that's literally a video game over. Like, it's a video game. It's
Well,
an
they
actual
might know-
video
You can call
game.
it. Cutscene starts here. Cutscene ends here.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
only difference is he doesn't get to try again if he dies.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he
Right.
does
That's
in a
a-
weird way because he has like. Fourth one is a video game, and for better or for worse, it's a video game. And
fourth John Wick film,
John Wick,
Neuromancer.
yeah, that one is. It's fine. I don't think it was as good as everyone said. The second one is fantastic. I love the.
Is that the one with Donnie Wu or Donnie Wen or whatever?
No, that's the fourth one.
That's
First
the
one's
fourth
Donnie
one?
Wu. The second one has Common and Ruby Rose and who else?
Okay.
It's that one's good.
Brings
And-
the Italians into it.
yeah, and it actually, and then you learn a little bit more about the High Table, and they go into Italy, and that
See,
one's just really well done.
that's
Beautiful
why
too.
yeah, it's
I'm not as
beautifully
interested.
shot,
I like
beautifully shot.
I like the simplicity, like like
No,
Hannah
the
said,
first
of
one's
the
good.
first
It's
film.
very simple. It's very simple.
It's a revenge film,
Yeah.
and he's driven, and I love the way that the antagonists fear and respect the protagonist. That's like my favorite. That's like
it's
that's
very
Build
well
that
done.
up so much.
They do it so well, and that was like that. They were like, oh, this feels different, and like I like that, like the feeling that like the person you needed to be afraid of was the hero, like the whole time, And I thought that was really great. So
No, there's a lot of good things about there's a lot of good things about those movies, but I'm trying to think. I can give you a whole list. If you like that one, I'll give you a long list of movies that are just as good that are different. Derek actually likes something. There you go. But that would be interesting.
Exposed.
John Wick is a human, ergo I like it. If John Wick was a Leshy, things would be different.
John Wick is Faye. He is Baba Yaga.
He is Baba Yaga, literally.
Metaphorically.
Oh,
I mean, it's a terrible translation of
he's
Baba
got-
Yaga, but
he's pretty much the Baba Yaga. that what made that. That's what I did like about that. It's like they were like, "Oh, did you cross him? Well, you're dead." Like
Right,
it's just
yeah.
not even a question. You're dead. It's like, yeah, you are dead. It's like
And,
there's
like,
nothing
Well, that's the
nothing
other
you
thing.
can do.
It is, Shadow Draken said, is John Wick even really a hero at that kind of body count?
he's an anti-hero.
They pretty much they very clearly lay out in the beginning of the film that like he was a mob hitman who killed untold numbers of people in order to literally build an entire criminal empire. So he's not a good guy.
But
Oh,
he's
no.
also Dexter style, he's taking down people who are bad. Technically, he is improving the world around him. It's just for his own personal gain.
The Dexter rationale, yes.
Dexter, boy, that was a good series.
Great show, ruined by the ending. But
Well, that's a whole other thing, but that's a very good show. Wow, we're at the end of the podcast or the show because that's when where we start talking about movies, and then Mark checks out because he's seen none of them.
all right. Well, we can go. I can go. We can go.
So anyhow, yes, we can find.
Yes,
what's your thing
Hannah-
tomorrow, Derek?
Tomorrow, I have no idea. I'm going to probably put it up to my patrons who support me. Night's the last call. We're closing in on 400 patrons, if you can believe it.
Oh my God,
That's really good.
Yeah. So, and I always, whenever possible, I throw the ball to them and let them sort of guide and direct me and take me whatever they were talking about. Right now, we just talked about Dragonbane, so a lot of people are playing Dragonbane. We got a lot of people playing Fabula Ultima. We got people kicking off. Someone just kicked off a West End Games D6 Star Wars game. Like there's a lot of new stuff, new hotness happening. So
wow. All right.
Anyways, so that you never know with Knights of the Last Call. You never know. It
You
could be
never know.
It could even be a boat.
It could be. Well, we'll be here as always and doing our regular roll for combat stuff. There's a few things coming up, I will say. We have we have a new backer kit. It's not a Kickstarter. Backer kit starting in a few weeks, where you'll be able to get the hardcover Year of Monsters updated, enhanced, and improved.
Would you say remastered?
Could be.
No, because if you already have it, you're going to get all of the content. This is only the entire point of this sort of campaign is to make a full print run instead of just printing exactly enough for the Kickstarter and pre-order people, because it kind of got added later on in the last Kickstarter when enough people asked for it. And so Steven realized if we can just do one more push, we can do an actual run and have them in stock so that people can buy them later. So the idea is if you bought the PDF or the hardcover already, you get everything. You don't have to do anything as long as the campaign succeeds. So
Yes.
do tell your friends who didn't have it, or maybe buy a Foundry module as a gift to your favorite
Or
GM
if you want the
so that you can
hardcover and
play
then-
it on their Foundry.
Yeah. I didn't pre-order
Or-
it like years ago
Yeah,
when I
that's
first
right.
put it in. You can just go to yearofmonsters.com. Look at that. I bought a URL just for this. I was like, wait, I should buy a URL. So yearofmonsters.com will bring you there. And we're finishing up Eldamon. It's getting close. Like
I mean, the text has been written
pretty
for PF2.
end of layout. I've been crunching the layout, and Mark and I are up till like 1:00 last night, literally sending back and forth information about the freaking
Oh,
Eldamon
he's
with
not
each other.
exaggerating.
Oh, I'm not
not one
exaggerating. It was 1 a.m. Like never stops. But it's getting close. And I can't say anything just yet, but we got big news coming in a few weeks. And I mean really big. You'll see.
Really? I don't even know what it is then.
Yeah, you do. You were in the meetings.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I think I do. I know what it is.
Okay, he knows. We got some
Very cool.
special guests coming and some partnerships coming up, and let's just say trying to get Roll for Combat another level higher. We're trying to level up again, and I think you're going to be very interested in what we got coming up.
Well, I look forward to it, and I'm
Me
sure
too.
you will be all eager to talk about it once you can.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, not just us, other people too. You'll see. You'll see.
All right,
You'll like
I
it.
will. I will wait. I will wait with bated breath.
And until then, if you want to battle the zoo, you have to roll for combat.
Oh, thing.
So yeah.